A night in with MauLer and the drinker, getting trashed with the web screen thinkers. A cheap night cause I'm feeling kinda thrifty, got a 10-pack of beers and a bottle of whiskey. Hop off the cork, have a glass of wine, as they'll say, I'll be fine. Trouble walking in a straight line, but pour me a Pinot Noir. It's open bar with our hosts, MauLer and the critical drinker.
All right, hello, you lovely people. Welcome.
Yay.
We are not late or early. We have arrived precisely when we mean to, as the saying goes. And
God, this is so expected.
It really is.
Everything about this is so expected. I was not surprised. I'm just going to say that immediately.
Oh yeah, we're going to get into that big time because we had to suffer through three entire episodes, 3 entire hours of this. In fact, it's more like 4 hours when you factor in all the adverts that Amazon insists on putting into every program they put out now. But we'll get into that. Don't worry.
Play, and Amazon may as well say, "I have such sites to show you." Like, this shit was torture. God damn, it shouldn't be.
All I could say for the people in chat who haven't experienced it yet, you have not seen what I have seen.
No.
Anyway. Before we do that, before we bring in our guests and we can try and tackle this absolute monstrosity, as is the custom on the open bar, we talk a little bit about the year that was. And in this case, it is 2009, it being open bar 109. So we were a bit light on like world events that were particularly interesting or technology events like new consoles or social media things that launched, because by 2009, most of it was actually already in place, which is kind of scary. And we're getting into the modern age now. But I can tell you from the point of view of movies, the top 5 of the year for 2009 were, unsurprisingly, Avatar was in top place with $2.74 billion. And that's in 2000. That's in 2009 money. So that's roughly $20 trillion by today's money, given the current rate of inflation. So it's pretty good. Yeah, they did all right with that one. I'm sure people will be talking about Avatar for generations. All the online fandoms and stuff that you get. It just made such an imprint in our society, didn't it, MauLer?
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
I'm overrun with people talking about Avatar. They won't shut up about it.
And when the third one arrives, was it called Fire and Ashes or something?
I don't know. Fire and Diarrhea or something.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah. The next one was Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, which was just shy of $1 billion. It was definitely the Harry Potter era. Ice Age: Dawn of the Dinosaurs was in 3rd place. And then Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. Again, it was the Transformers era. So those franchises were duking it out back then, man. And then a bit of a weird outlier, 2012. That was $770 million, which is pretty respectable, really. I miss disaster movies like that. We just don't get them anymore.
Yeah, I guess. Maybe if we were hoping to get them back, they would be awful. So you never know. It's like a, what's it called? Monkey's paw type of thing.
Now we just get disastrous movies, which is
there you go.
Whole different ballgame. But it was also the year that gave us District 9. Excellent.
That movie's awesome.
Yeah, Watchmen, which I really like, and probably Zack Snyder's finest hour. Paranormal Activity really kicked off the franchise there.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
Zombieland, great fun.
Oh my God. You're naming so many films in a row where I'm like, yeah, I didn't think that was awful.
Yeah.
I remember these years, Drinker. It was different. It was a different time.
Up, which another good one, actually.
Some people cite that as the end of Pixar. Up,
I wouldn't be surprised. One of the best intros you can get with a movie like that as well, with no dialogue, just telling an entire story.
Phenomenal, yeah.
Not so good though. X-Men Origins Wolverine.
What do you mean? That was incredible.
It made its mark on cinema. I'll say that much.
Yes, it did.
I gave us Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool, though, an early prototype version of him, which, interesting story behind that, actually, where he's been lobbying for a Deadpool movie for quite a while, and they said, this is the version you're going to play, take it or leave it. So he did his best.
Yeah, and then they sewed his mouth shut.
Yeah.
That was the real fucking cleverness yeah, anyway, moving on.
I'm not gonna lie, right? There's times when I'd like to do that to him as well because he could be a bit much, but that's okay.
You gotta
We
take
also
him
got
in small doses. Yeah, that's the idea.
yeah. He's like diarrhea, you know. He could be quite enjoyable in small doses, but yeah, if it goes on for too long, you start to panic a little bit.
If we go for a week, should I?
Yeah, that's when you got to get to the doctors pronto. We also got Inglorious Bastards and
I fucking love that movie.
Yeah, and Terminator Salvation, which I feel like my opinion of that film has slowly gone up over the years. Like, I actually, in view of all the crap that we've had from the Terminator franchise and the endless spinning of the same wheel, it was kind of nice to see them do something a little bit different. So, yeah. I don't mind it so much now. I did want to comment as well because I just happened to look through the biggest video games of that year, right?
Okay,
and I was amazed by what I saw. Like of the top 10 best-selling games of the year, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of them were for the Wii. So top spot was Wii Sports, then Wii Sports Resort, then Modern Warfare 2, fair enough. Super Mario Brothers on the Wii, Wii Fit Plus, then Wii Fit, and then Mario Kart Wii, and Assassin's Creed 2, and then Wii Play.
I was kind of hoping you were going to say something like Wii Sports Modern Warfare 2. Like, that's the name.
Wii Warfare.
Wii.
And then in 10th place was Resident Evil 5. So, yeah.
Hey.
But
we
yeah,
should play that someday. Me and you.
I honestly would love to. I would love to do that. Count me in. But yeah, the Wii absolutely dominated the video game landscape back in 2009. So kind of crazy now looking back. But anyway, that was the year that was, and we've babbled on enough. So how about we bring in our guests so we can talk about the real
cold. They're outside.
Yeah, I think it's about time we give you the meat and give it to you raw. So in that spirit, we have Robert Meyer Burnett, the Little Platoon, and the Despot of Antrim. Welcome our lovely guests and
gentlemen.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Just on gaming in 2009, I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure the first or like the earliest iteration of Minecraft was 2009, but it was called Cave Game or something. But I think that came out in 2009.
My God, yeah, we're going back a ways now. I start like in terms of like overall unit sales and stuff, it wasn't mentioned yet, but I imagine if it was just a kind of early version, wait till we get to 2010, we'll see what happens. But it's kind of crazy because we're kind of used to when we do these recaps of the year. Up until fairly recently, they've been like, old franchises or, I can't believe this thing started in this year. And now we've kind of surpassed all of that. And we're actually just getting into the modern era where technology, culture, and our intellectual capabilities all began to stagnate and in fact regress. And so this is where we're not going to see such massive leaps forward anymore when we do these recaps.
One thing to look out for, Drinker, when you're doing the recap for 2012, look out for 3D re-releases. Because they're like the forerunner to the Disney live action remake. They're these cheap cash grabs.
You know,
and 2009 Avatar started the 3D craze. It's a really interesting little period of cinema. It runs for 3 years. Because I'm researching it at the minute for a video I'm working on, and 2009 it starts, 2010 it peaks, and then 2011 it already started to decline.
That was a short-lived craze.
If you're researching it, then you must have encountered because we've found an encountering of it in a different way. Like when we do EFAP movies for Halloween every year, we'll go through a franchise, and you'll always notice like, wait, this is the blah 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 3D because they always
Saw 3D.
Saw 3D. I think like Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street or stuff like those kinds of franchises that are just consistently coming out. You'll be like, this is the 3D one when it came out. Everyone was fucking obsessed with 3D. They're always terrible. Have you seen the Final Destination 3D one? That's one of the funniest fucking movies.
Yeah. It's like every shot is in service of the 3D effect. That's all it is.
The effects are hideous. And if you look at the casting, that was one of the got the biggest laughs out of us. Is this character's just called Racist's girlfriend, and like MILF 2.
Oh my God, it's like social media discourse in 2024. It's crazy.
At least they were honest. I love the honesty of it. The movie knew what it was.
Nice and simple, straightforward. Yeah.
What was that one where everyone was getting chased through like an abandoned mining facility by a guy in a gas mask, and he was like throwing his axe at the screen and stuff?
Oh,
Was that
I
My
know what you're
Bloody
talking about.
Valentine?
Yeah, I think that's
Yes,
3D.
that was it. Yeah, that was 3D. Yeah, it was just so you could get that axe effect in there, like straight at the screen. Anyway, well, that was 2009, but I guess we're here in 2024, and we're experiencing the Rings of Power. And wow,
I would
I
like
don't
to
think
open with a question, if possible.
why was this show?
No,
Just
as a
why?
pitch, I believe the vast majority of chat have not seen anything. They certainly haven't seen what we have seen. So I'd like to say this, as they've probably seen some of the tweets we've put out, so they already know about some of the more shocking elements. But I want to ask this question in isolation just to see reactions, right? So if someone was pitching this show to you and they said, have you ever wanted to see Sauron as a flappy, wet bag of slime that slides down a mountainside until he flip-flaps along the floor and gets splattered by a carriage? Have you ever wanted to see that?
Do you know who he reminds me of? He didn't remind me of Venom. He reminded me of the Oogie Boogie Man from the Nightmare Before Christmas.
Spot on.
I was laughing throughout the entire
without his sack when he's just made of bugs. That's what he looked like. I was like, oh, it's the Oogie Boogie Man.
I think
Oh, yeah.
the
It's-
funniest
I was waiting
shot
for the
is
music to come on. I'm the Oogie Boogie Man.
when he squeezes out of the
when
hole
I-
of the mountain and just slides really slow.
It's when he flips over himself, like, and he gets stuck in a cartwheel because
Yeah.
it's like when I've taken the critical doggos out for a walk. Right, sometimes Smokey likes to get up on a sort of slope on a hill and take a dump. That's where he likes to do it, like the most challenging terrain possible, and then it just kind of slides down, and that's like what I was seeing there. It was just. What is this even meant to be? And it's a serious scene as well. You're meant to
It's a
feel
serious
sorry.
scene.
I don't know.
Oh, dude. Okay, so we should probably give some context, right, of how that. Nah, don't need to do that. You guys are familiar with Hellraiser at least somewhat. The scene in the first one where he's rebuilding himself gradually is incredible for effects. It's so like, especially when I saw that as a kid, I was blown away by it. I thought they might have done something like that. I thought we were going to see maybe a skeleton made of horrors and it's slowly reforming and coming back together. They went for such an embarrassing version. He's just a bag of stuff flopping around. How could you? Like you waste
He's
all
like
of that money.
a really bad version of Venom. That's like the symbiote before he's attached himself to a person. So
At least Venom is trying to be funny a lot of the time.
I mean, if I get before we, I guess, get into the real minutia of this, because it's like 3 entire episodes to cover, man. It's a nightmare. I don't even know how we're going to do this, but we'll wing it. I guess I just wanted to give an overall impression first. This was one of the most challenging viewing experiences I've ever had. I had to force myself to sit down and watch these because I kept trying to get through these 3 episodes. I kept thinking of things to go and do. I kept thinking of excuses to get up and leave the room and do something else. I wanted to be anywhere else except sat down in front of my TV watching this crap. And every time I would pause it, thinking like maybe 15, 20 minutes had gone by, I would see the timer on the episode and like 5 minutes had passed. I felt like by the end, I experienced some kind of existential crisis. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I've been here for about 3 weeks and I'm still here watching this fucking show and it's never going to end. And I'm just terrified for my own sanity. I don't know what's happening anymore. It was one of the most bizarre and unsettling experiences I've ever had with something like this. And I never want to do it again.
Well, there was that
Just
slightly weird
awful.
experience because you look at the timestamp for episode 2 and you find, oh, it's only 45 minutes. Well, that's a relief. But actually, by the end of it, you can't really tell the difference. It feels just as long as the other 2.
I miss Marvel TV shows where it's like, this will be 30 minutes, then you find out 15 are credits, and you're like, oh, sweet. I've only got 10 minutes of TV shows over 2 scenes.
Yeah, and because you can skip the intros and then the recap and everything, so that usually shaves a few minutes off as well. But this just does not let up, and it's so boring. Like I was just,
dude, the Gandalf scenes especially was so fucking
Christ.
dry.
That was the most obvious to cut. I mean, there's so much wrong with it. I was actually trying. There's so much wrong with it that I was coming at it from the opposite angle. I was like, okay, stop. what is good about it? Like, what did I like about it? Is there anything? And I did identify 2 things. No,
There's
3
something
things
I
that I
like,
liked.
yeah.
Yeah. I'll quickly, Matt.
You can get them out of the way if
Hines,
you want.
Kieran
Yeah.
Hines is in it. He's a brilliant actor.
Yeah, I was kind of sad to see him, to be honest.
I was annoyed at his inclusion, though, right?
Yeah,
because I'll tell you why. I'll tell you exactly why. 1, he's in a shit show, but 2, right? We talked before about like how they've got this Middle Earth setting, which for the most part is set around a Northern European setting, and every time you go into any podunk village in the middle of nowhere, it looks like downtown LA. You've got Asian people, you've got black people, you've got East Asians, all mixed into this ridiculous cultural blending, melting pot. Sorry. They go to Rune, right? The far east, like, which is the Middle Earth equivalent of the Middle East, right? This is finally your chance to actually have diverse actors in universe and have it make sense, and you pick a fucking white guy to be the main dude. Why? What is wrong with you? There's a million like Middle Eastern actors out there who could have played that role fucking brilliant, and you pick Kieran Hines, possibly the whitest man that's ever existed. Fucking show, honestly, I hate it. It made me actually angry watching it. Not just that, but every aspect of this show.
Feminem was in Rune too. Like, Feminem is whiter than white. She's like albino.
Oh my god!
Oh, the grim shady.
It was so fucking. When I saw her, I was like, "Yes, she's back." What an awful idea. It's like seeing Jar Jar Binks come back. You're like, yes, here he is.
You know that thing that everyone mocked about season 1? Sure, let's bring her back.
Oh my god, she's so goofy.
I mean, you know, Platoon, Rob, like, what was your, like, just before we get into any sort of details, like, what was your overall impression of these episodes? Like, what was your experience of watching it?
Well, like you, one of the things you tweeted out that apparently, that Mordor is full of now orcs that want to settle down and have families.
Oh my god!
And I'm like, is that
broke
really?
Me.
I'm like, really? I think here's the thing that I don't understand about the people that are making this show. If you look at Fellowship of the Ring and you look at after the 5-minute montage that explains the history of Middle Earth, the first thing you're introduced to is the Shire. And Gandalf's cart comes in, you see Frodo talk to Gandalf, "Yo, late." And they drive through the Shire and you see disdainful looks from some of the hobbits at Gandalf. Clearly there's a past there. 5 minutes in to that sequence, all you need to know about the Shire. You identify with it. We as viewers understand exactly where we are. We like these people. We even like the people that don't like Gandalf. We like everything. We completely understand everything we need to know about where we are in Middle Earth. I don't feel that way about any scene in this show. I watch this show and I'm like, where am I? Why do I care? What am I supposed to feel like? And I felt this way during the entire first season. They keep introducing people because it feels like they think we're supposed to have them in this show, but they haven't earned any of it. So the reason, Drinker, I think you're so bored by it, as I was, I'm watching this and I feel that there's a barrier between this show and me caring. I'd like to care. I'd love to love a Middle Earth set show that tells us about the First Age and the War of the Ring and all of that. I have no interest. And I find that that's a hard thing for a showrunner to do for me because I'm pretty forgiving. I have no interest in anything that's going on or any of the way the story is being told or unfolding. And in a way, I hate myself for it, but I hate them more for not understanding. Go back and watch the opening 5 minutes of Fellowship of the Ring. That's how you establish sequences. That's how you establish environments and characters and world building. Because we as the audience, we understand exactly who and what these people are. And from the opening scene of Rings of Power, when they showed us Galadriel and the snow-capped peaks, I'm like, who is this? Where are we? Why are we doing this? And I feel that every scene in this show is just like that.
It's a poor imitation, and like, yeah, with every scene, every moment of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I never doubted for 1 second that I was in that world. I was fully immersed in it. The verisimilitude, as you point out, was there 100%. With this, I just feel like I'm watching a really crappy stage production that just had loads of money behind it. You know, it's amateurish, it's sloppy, it's someone's bad fan fiction that's somehow been given $1 billion budget. I never feel like I'm part of this world.
You're particularly lost to begin with, but I can't believe they started this season on a scene with two characters that we're supposed to be familiar with. One in universe who has changed his face, and the other that got recast. So it's like, who the fuck are these people?
Yeah.
As someone who rewatched season 1, I was like, yeah, I'm following it. I recognize the makeup you've got for Radar, and I know that Sauron can change his appearances and stuff. But I was like, the average person, though, I'm sure they're just going to be like, I don't know what this is. they all stab him. And I was just thinking to myself, like, you should have got his blood in a jar, I guess, or something. I was like, that always gets you.
They took the... Because it's described in the books as like the essence of Sauron always remains, like no matter like whether you kill his physical body, like somehow his essence survives and it can like gradually transfer to a new place and he'll set up a new base.
Form, though, not as goo.
Exactly, yeah. They took this so fucking literally, where he just becomes flumpy black goo that just flops down a mountainside, and like. He's lying there in the dirt somewhere, and it's just happenstance that someone runs over him with a cartwheel.
Oh, I can't believe
like, sorry, a cart, not like someone doing cartwheels across the landscape, but you know,
that would have made more sense.
And to be
like,
clear,
if that person hadn't come along, would he have just died? Would Sauron literally have?
They keep flopping. He just keep on flopping.
Literally, I've actually got in my notes is like flop monster ? Is he just going to flop across the entire?
He's going to flop until he finds something.
Does he have limited flopping range?
He's just.
No, you remember, powered by plenty of rats and millipedes. He's going to go on forever. Away. That's just how I want. It's how I need to see Sauron to believe his power. Like seeing him like that. Compare it to the prologue of Lord of the Rings, where you see this wimpy guy getting killed. Who cares? The flop monster, the sack of jelly. That's where it's at, man. I was like, oof, wouldn't want to fuck with this guy.
Well, it's also so uncreative. I mean, you'd think with Sauron they would give you something majestic, like maybe he disassembles somehow and blows away into the wind, and you see. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, his essence is blown onto the trees or onto the land or something, and it's permeating everything. And it gives you something that is, in a way, darkly majestic or has a fairy tale quality to it. But watch, and that's the thing. You feel like you guys brought up earlier, somebody was watching Venom and thought, oh, let's do it like that.
Like, why couldn't they have done it like if they did it like Hellraiser, where the skeleton is building up first, and then he is to crawl out into a place that has some level of vegetation or greenery, and everything is like an aura around him getting sucked into him. Yeah, everything goes grey and crusted or die. Like everything's there's life sources getting drawn into him. More power, something like that. Instead of the flop monster, who thought the flop monster was the way to go?
The thing is, those showrunners looked at that sequence being previs, being edited, till they got the final effects in, and the entire time they all said, yep, that's the way we're going to do it. And we're sitting here debating this for 3 minutes and are coming up with ways that were better and more effective, that weren't cringe-inducing or indeed laughter-inducing.
It all has the effect of making this seem small and petty.
Yes.
You know, like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and certainly the books, they made it epic. Like all of these things seemed, as you said, majestic. They had great weight behind them, and they felt like significant. But like when you see it like this, the flop monster, it is laughable and it's small and it's so literal and physical and just limited by that. Like that's not what Sauron is. He's not.
Even the manner of his death as well. I saw someone in chat ask how Sauron was defeated. He was stabbed with his own crown after being mean to some orcs. Like it's not. This is not an epic death. This is not some grand moment where like the pinnacle of evil, which is on the cusp of retaking his power, is suddenly thrown down. No. He's an idiot. He stands there in a cave and he tells the orcs, "No one will ever like or accept you. Look, watch this." Stabs an orc for no reason. And then gets stabbed with his own crown by Adar, and then he turns into the flop monster who slinks away. It's just
really appreciated the shot of him looking up at the crown and being like, Yep, that's the right way. He's not going to stab me. All right, I can look down.
But you don't understand the poetry there, MauLer, because it's like a ring. You see, he's looking up at the ring.
Ooh.
Oh my god, it's like
That-
poetry. It rhymes.
That entire first scene didn't make any sense from a. It's just the worst writing because how it opens up is Sauron is standing in front of the orcs in a giant cave, making his case to them as to why he should be the leader. And his first line, I think, is something like "Morgoth is dead," and that is a perfect example of non-diegetic exposition. Like everybody knows this. This is purely for the audience.
Yeah. So guys, just want to make it clear, Morgoth died, right? We all know.
As you know, this is the current state of affairs.
Imagine Napoleon walking into the National Assembly on the day of the Brumaire coup and saying, "Guys, the Bourbons are gone. We need a new ruler in France." Like, no, that wouldn't happen. Everyone knows this. This has been established years ago. They've moved on to other things. And where's his bodyguard? He doesn't have a bodyguard. And this isn't how power is transferred in an army. When the leader of because when you're writing fantasy, you have to draw from history. Like George R.R. Martin referenced the War of the Roses when he was writing Game of Thrones. So history should be your foundation when you're writing fantasy. And if you're going to do something like Rings of Power, look at what happens to large armies when the leader dies. Like, who gets it next? Like, look at what happened to Mao Zedong, for example. Why was he chosen to take over the communists during the Long March, or even Napoleon during the Napoleonic eras? Like, that power transfers don't occur because of big speeches. There's usually an adjutant general who takes over. Like, even
I always got the impression as well
out there. Because this is not like a straight historical tale. Like the power transfers amongst orcs do not occur politically to begin with. Orcs are not individual beings who have complete agency, are able to form fucking unions and decide who their own king's going to be.
Yeah.
They're not. That's not what they are, and it's not what Sauron is either. So talking about everything feeling very small, by virtue of turning Sauron into effectively one political candidate amongst many political candidates whom the orcs may choose or not, automatically divests him of a huge amount of the power of reputation he's supposed to have. Sauron is not a person. Sauron is basically like a demiurge. She's a demigod. Sauron is almost, I think Tolkien describes him as the closest thing to pure evil you can find in The Lord of the Rings. The orcs never chose to be ruled by Sauron, and Sauron didn't have to contest for Morgoth's crown after Morgoth was defeated. This happened because this is the way in which evil functions in this world. And if you start messing with that stuff, then you have to start diminishing Sauron. I get that's what they want to do, because they want to try and create this from the ground up villain origin story again. But that's not how these characters are supposed to work, and it's not how this world works either. Because if you go forward in time then, and you say, well, okay, the orcs are able to choose who they lead, who leads them. Is Sauron going to have a massive purge of all the orcs in the Southlands because they chose to follow somebody else? Are the orcs able to say, you know what, Sauron, you're a bit too mean to us, so we might go and, start our own little thing somewhere else? None of this works. It actually takes away from everything that follows it, because they have completely misconstrued the point of the story, as always.
Well, this is the moral relativism that they want to impose upon the world of Lord of the Rings, where they want to now portray the orcs as just a people who want self-determination and have to be won over by a leader. And they actually now have families with women and children. And there's even, this honestly made me cringe out of my own body almost. There's a scene where an orc begs Adar to not persecute any further wars. He says, do we have to have another war? Can't we just stay here and be safe? And he actually then goes and hugs his wife, his orc wife, who's still more attractive than most Scottish women, to be fair, and his fucking horrible, deformed, orc baby that she's holding. What is this? This isn't Lord of the Rings. This is someone trying to impose 2024. There's no such thing as good or evil anymore. It's all a matter of perspective kind of mentality onto it. It's exactly the same as what they tried to do with the Acolyte, where there's no Sith, there's no Jedi anymore, no one's good or evil, it's all just perspectives, and it doesn't work with the universe that you're trying to do this in.
Just to go back on one of the points Robert made earlier very quickly, because you were talking about how you never feel at home in any particular place, and the story, though it's so grand in scope, you never really feel like you belong anywhere. I think this is part of the reason for that. It's not just that the show is spread out over way too many plot lines to begin with. We don't spend enough time in any one place. The places don't seem particularly involved in the stories, all of that stuff. But one of the other reasons for that is because the show is so much more interested in humanizing its villains than it is in making its actual human characters seem human. We don't have enough time to spend actually turning protagonists into characters. The great advantage of the way Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings, which if you go back into the Silmarillion, you can find where all of the evil powers come from. You can have conversations about the nature of evil and what's really involved in it and whether there's any politics there to begin with. But in the story of The Lord of the Rings, you don't have to distract the narrative by going to flesh out the internal politics of Mordor. It allows you to focus the story very much more on the nature of heroism, on what heroes are, the very different forms they take, what trials will affect different types of hero differently. It makes for a much more focused, character-driven story for all it's known for its massive world building, because we're not being distracted by having to talk about orcs with babies who don't want to go to war. But the show is oblivious to that, as it is to all things.
I think it's a great point. And also another, to take that even further, once you introduce the idea of family-oriented orcs, you now have to then continue on with that idea, which means you've got to go even further into this ridiculousness. Because once you've seen one orc who cares about his family, you're like, well, wait a minute. And if that's the case, you know, oh, let's not go off to war. It's like, no. You've now dangled a thread that unravels the entire orcs as a group of antagonists. Instead, you're now going to be looking for, oh, how else are they going to humanize these characters? I mean,
it's the Stormtrooper dilemma. It's exactly like what they tried to do with The Force Awakens, where they have Finn and they imply that like Stormtroopers actually have relationships with each other and they care about each other when they die. But they also want you to cheer and whoop and holler like idiots when they get blown up, and like Finn's like shooting down TIE fighters. You can't do all of this stuff and have it be internally consistent. It doesn't work.
Although you can do, you know, it was great to see that scene in The Mandalorian season 2 when Bill Burr talks to that Imperial officer. And he's not an Imperial officer, but he talks to him about this massacre that Bill Burr knew about.
Yes. Yeah.
And I mean, that was a great moment. And I think that once you establish that orcs, you can make the orc civilization interesting, but you have to make them interesting from an orc perspective. Don't impose human structure onto orcs. Figure out a way to make the orcs have their own internal, you know, looks like meat's back on the menu, boys. Well, that's good, because what have we been eating when we don't have meat? You know, that's an interesting question. Are there people that prefer, do they eat other orcs? You know, what can they do? And you can do something from an orc perspective to flesh out, so to speak, their culture, but to impose human structure on orcs demystifies the orcs. And as you said, Platoon, makes them not the antagonists that they should be.
Well, they're almost like a force of nature when you see them within the Lord of the Rings movies, especially, where they are just this tidal wave of destruction and war and death that comes sweeping across the land.
Humanoid locusts.
And what's more important, like the orcs themselves aren't important. They are just the hammer that like the enemy wields. But what's important is the people behind them, whether it's Saruman, whether it's Sauron, and also how do our heroes respond to this threat? What's the how are they going to be tested, whether it's going to be physically or spiritually or morally, whatever. That's the essence of the story. But now when you introduce this level of sophistication to the orc culture, there's no going back from that. You've now made it so that they are just people that you should empathize with because they just want to live in peace. But oh no, they have to go off to war again. Like that, it doesn't work then. You can't have both of those extremes and make them work within the same universe. This is why these people that have written this show should never have been let within a mile of a writer's room when it was anything to do with Lord of the Rings, because they don't understand the universe that they're working within.
And the orcs fundamentally, and this is what the Lord of the Rings movies got right in terms of the environmental world building, fundamentally orcs should not be valuing the individual life. Like they were operate as more of a hive mind in terms of their morality. So if you look at the Two Towers, there's a scene where they're trying to break down the wooden gate at the side of Helm's Deep, and they run the ram up the up the slope, and as they're running it up, they just push their own Uruks aside and they fall off and die.
Yeah.
And the point of that is these creatures don't value individual life. They don't even care about it enough to delay their action on the gate to save a few of their own men. Right? A human army wouldn't do that, but Uruks will, because they don't care about the individual. And that's part of what makes them menacing and aggressive and alien. They must be mentally and morally alien to humans to really feel like the bad guys and to create that dichotomy between the two. And that's environmental
100%.
world building is a huge part of that. And this thing does the complete opposite.
That's what Theoden says when he says, what can men do against such reckless hate? Essentially, it's an enemy that's willing to sacrifice 100 of their guys to kill one of ours, and they will not stop. They don't care how many of them that you kill. They'll never quit. They'll never retreat. That's what you're up against. It's a tidal wave of death.
The most humanity I want to see in orcs is like in Lord of the Rings trilogy, where Saruman's talking to that one orc who's like, "We've not got enough fuel to feed the fires." Like a contractor telling him on it what the building project's looking like. And Saruman's like, "Yeah, you go chop the trees in my other forest." He's like, "Sweet."
You know, of all things, right? Warhammer did the best job of explaining why orcs are the way they are. They're the only sentient creatures in the universe that don't fear death. That's why they just throw themselves recklessly into battle with no fear of being killed, because they've got no fear of it. Like, okay, fine. That explains a lot of their actions then. That's why they're willing to take such enormous casualties. That's why they are just a force of nature instead of a normal army that will, advance or retreat.
And that's a very simple, easily understood quality that could definitely, again, that in itself is to explore what that's like on a daily basis. Could be really interesting, but that's not what we get.
Yeah. And honestly, there's so many things I could pick apart with these 3 episodes. The tortured metaphors just about ended me.
Oh, Jesus Christ, man.
line.
My favorite one was we can crush 2 spiders with 1 boot.
It was Galadriel's one where it's like he played me like a harp, but the melody was not the one that I would have chosen. Like,
well, yeah.
Drinkers,
Then
speak again when I cannot see the lie behind your eyes.
Didn't that harp line? Didn't Elrond said something like, "Actually, it was of yours. He plucked the notes of your souls."
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up, both of you.
Oh, there was another good one.
Torturing these pure metaphors.
His creations were so beautiful that they would make the sun cry tears of fire.
Oh my god! Shut up.
Well, there's tons of them. It's the same shit. They learned nothing.
It doesn't stop. It's like someone wrote this script using an AI and they specified like at least 60% of all dialogue must contain a metaphor. I don't care if it makes sense. Just make it happen. That's what it's like. It's so unrelenting.
Oh, what was the judgment one? They say like 3 times. Yeah, judge the work and leave judgment concerning those who wrought it for the judge who sees all things.
Yeah.
What fucking crap is that? I legit had to listen to it again. I was like, what the fuck did he just say to me? Use judge 3 times in the same sentence? Not deliberately either. It was like, it feels clunky because they didn't use any other words.
Oh, but he's the old and wise person, though. That he's just speaking like that because he's so very old and so very wise. And that's why the first time we meet him, he says, "There's nothing more beautiful than Valinor." And then the last time we see him, he says, "There are things more beautiful than Valinor." It's just like, and having decided there's like a volcano under the water in Lindon, which he can throw rings into, but then he doesn't want to throw the rings into them because he saw them because they're really good. And then he brings it back.
He had a little boop on his ship.
He's like, I'll just look into this bag and like, oh, rings look pretty.
He's a great example of, it might have been Platoon or Robert, he was talking about it earlier, whereby the characters have no characterization. So this old man that somebody goes to him with the rings. What's his name?
Elrond.
Elrond goes to him with the rings and says, "We need to destroy these rings." Don't even get me started on the writing for Elrond. That makes no sense. But basically, he takes the rings. This is the point that Drinker's making. Like, we can't even get to a mistake without talking the mistakes that preceded it. Everything is wrong with us. So he takes the rings to this old man, and the old man goes, "We need to destroy them." And then he looks at them and says, "Oh, they look pretty. Let's not destroy them." But he has no characterization whatsoever. Meanwhile, they're showing orc families. That that's one good example of a character with absolutely no characterization. You have no idea who he is or what he believes. He doesn't seem to have any sort of moral compass or principles or anything because he's so changeable. So many of the characters are very flighty and changeable. And one minute they think one thing, the next minute they think the next thing according to what the script needs them to think.
He's been dragged by the plot into a particular position immediately because I was kind of interested to see what his justification might have been. And then I was like, oh, never mind. The writers have no idea what they're doing. Because Elrond says, essentially, the rings are evil, made by a sorcerer. He's going to control and destroy all of everything, corrupt everything. I'm terrified of this shit. I want no part of it. Those rings, bad, 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 bad. And his response is, well, you wouldn't cast a poem to the flames because a drunk person wrote it. Like, that has literally nothing to do with what I just said.
Justice for drunk people.
It was so funny to me as well because the whole point is he didn't have his hand personally on the fucking forge when these things were made. It's about his corruption of the rings. That's very important. It's going to destroy the whole world. And he's just like, yeah, well, you know, you don't judge. You separate the art from the artist, okay, guys?
I mean, surely a warning sign as well is like everyone who like kind of looks upon these rings is immediately entranced by them and just wants to put them on. It's like,
isn't it?
Yeah, that's like a big red flag right there. It's like clearly these things are more than they seem, and you should not trust yourself to them.
They act incredibly dumb though, even before they put the rings. Like every character in my division, I think Despot just said, is absolutely balked in this show. So you have Elrond who says, no, as has been related, that rings were created under Sauron's influence, evil, must destroy them. Takes them to like the one old man he trusts in all the world, who decides not to destroy them. Elrond doesn't ask any questions about that. He just carries on being immensely distrustful. Meanwhile, Galadriel, who's the one person who's believed that Sauron is back and is the biggest threat to the world, doesn't tell anyone who Sauron is. Doesn't tell anyone that like he was the one who helped make the rings. Then when Gil-galad finally does know, and Gil-galad believes that the rings are the most important thing for the salvation of his entire race, he's like, no, I'm sure Eregion's fine. There's no problem there. We might send a letter at some point, but fuck it.
You know what he says, like, as well, they've got rivers and they've got big walls that can protect Eregion. It's like, yeah, but have you considered
that was another example?
Infiltrate?
That was another example of non-diegetic dialogue. Like Galadriel says, "Oh, I'm worried because these rings." And he's like, "As you know, Galadriel, Eregion has 2 rivers and a big." It's fuck.
I will say, Elrond. I think he might have been assassinated the worst out of everybody in this. Though there's an argument to be made for plenty of the characters, but he was
everyone.
Yeah,
one of them was literally assassinated, though. So I think that's probably the most Bronn. All in season 1 spent building her up.
So, but I was going to say, like, there are times where I feel completely in sync with Elrond. So when he was like, rings are bad, they're real bad, everything about them is bad, and then they introduce and all of the characters that are nearest to them go, oh, and they put them on like, oh, and Elrond's like, they're clearly bad. Like, why is no one noticing how bad this is?
They even do the thing where they all like they've got their rings on and they all kind of hold their hands close to each other, just like the opening for Lord of the Rings. And it's like, you understand that was just a metaphorical representation of the 3 rings. Like, it's not like they actually stood like that, like just because they felt compelled to.
Yeah,
but again, this fucking show just takes everything literally and has to show it to you on screen actually happening.
And then Elrond,
it's Lord of the Rings for retards.
I guess it's over. The world is fucked. I'm gonna go build a boat. I was like, what the fuck?
And we haven't even gotten to just the really basic stuff that doesn't make any sense, like basic plot holes. I'll give you an example. So there's a group of peasant refugees walking along the road, and Sauron post-goo monster. So Sauron is like Cell from Dragon Ball Z. He meets a human, he absorbs the cell as a goo monster, and then he's a human. So he goes walking along the road, he runs into these peasants, and there's an old man, and he says, "Where are you going, son?" And Sauron something like, "Well, I'm going to go to Mordor." "Oh, you'll die if you go over there. Come with us. We're going to get on a big boat and go to a country across the sea. They say it's great there." And then the next sea, they're in this giant boat. But I'm thinking, hold on a minute. These are penniless peasants. How did they get a fucking ship of the line?
Yeah.
Like, stuff like that.
Why did they take this like random dude with them? Like, you know, you get like prime lodging aboard this like big galleon that we're all going on. Like, what have you done to earn that?
One of the worst scenes in all of season 1 was the moment in the library when Galadriel learns that the symbol is on the map and the symbol shows Mordor. But then off screen, she learns that there's another symbol which denotes the King of the Southlands. And since what's his name? Halbrand is wearing it. He must be King of the Southlands. And he says, "No, I stole it." And she says, no, you're definitely king of the Southlands. And then this episode, she's like, no, he literally did steal it. He just took it from an old guy. That's it. He was telling the truth.
Yeah, it was not. It was so uncomplicated that there was no fucking point in showing us. Everything that we learned from season 1, they show us in. It takes 22 fucking minutes to do the intro. We knew almost all of it. Remember, Adar talks about how like I killed Sauron. The leadership was in contesting. And so like everything they show us. And the fucking newest thing they show us is a stupid jelly bag. We didn't need to see that. That doesn't help anything.
Do you think there's a reason for this in beyond the actual show, and it's like a meta thing where they know that 65% of viewers didn't actually finish season 1, and so they feel like they have to just start afresh and actually recap people who've never fucking even watched this stuff before.
What will a brand new audience member do with that opening 20 minutes? What
I'm trying to put myself into the head of a crazy person, and like I'm struggling a little bit, but I'm trying to surmise here. Maybe that's why they tried to fill in the gaps somehow, and they thought this was going to be the solution. It's nonsense, obviously, but it's the best I can come up with.
They did it in season 1. Remember they show that like hyper CG eagles and fell beasts and armies killing each other, and they were like, aha, yeah, you like this, don't you? It didn't work.
Well, one of the things I think is a problem, this might seem strange to say, is the people that are making this show are too wrapped up in the fact that they're making a Lord of the Rings show. They should put all of that aside. And they should start thinking, okay, we don't get to use Lord of the Rings iconography. We don't get to use anything we've seen before. Like you said, Drinker, the first 5 minutes of Fellowship is metaphoric. It's Galadriel retelling the story. That none of that actually happened the way it was depicted. So start out and show us, like I was talking about, the Shire. Introduce people to us and make them understand who they are. And stop worrying about the Lord of the Rings of it all. But they don't. I mean, you got to make me understand a character like in any great IP. When you're the first movie in that IP, like we were talking about Alien earlier, we don't know any of these people. We don't know what they've done. We don't know what they've been. We have no knowledge. And what do we do to get to learn about them in Alien? They eat a meal. They're eating a meal and they're having chit chat over food. Now, that is something we as an audience all understand. And because the scene was interesting and the actors are compelling, we watch this scene and we're learning about them. We're learning what kind of people they are. We're learning about their interpersonal relationships because we, the audience, can relate to them. That's what great writing does, even in fantasy worlds. I feel like in this film, nobody is grounded to any reality I understand. And I'm trying to follow along with what people want and what people are going to do, but none of their motivations ring true. And I think it makes it all a boring slog because you're watching this stuff and we're so disconnected as an audience understanding who is doing what because the time frames don't work. All this stuff is so compressed and it's like they've got these mythos, but they couldn't follow the time of how Tolkien wrote them in the appendices. So they have to compress everything down so they can make it palatable for a TV audience. And none of it works.
Because so you're watching... Yeah, I would imagine like Sauron, say, infiltrating the elves and like convincing them to forge the various rings and being the giver of gifts. That's probably something that unfolded over decades. Whereas in this show, we're probably going to see it in the matter of days because everything has to happen real quick like that because we can't pay attention to anything otherwise. And that's the mentality throughout this show. Everything becomes small and mundane and quick and simplified. You lose the majesty of the Lord of the Rings mythos because it doesn't exist anymore.
I think, though, to one of Robert's other points, though, is that because so many of it's not just that we don't know most of these characters, it's also that most of these characters don't know each other. If you go back, certainly through season 1, the standout scenes from a character level, from my point of view, were always between Elrond and, I keep calling him Prince Harry, Durin, the younger Durin, because they are actually friends. And so they have things to talk about that is not grand scale epicness. They know each other, so they have an ability to turn what is an almost incomprehensibly large story into a very small, relatable, personal thing that actually makes you think, hey, people are involved in this story. But if you go through every other plot line, Galadriel doesn't know Halbrand. She barely knows Gil-galad. The hobbits don't know what is going to turn out to be Gandalf. nobody in the Southlands know each other except arguably for the Don Lemon elf and the woman who's not appearing in season 2, and that's only because the show tells us that they're in love, but we don't really see it. No one else knows each other, so they have nothing else to speak about beyond, oh my goodness, isn't it terrible how this big epic thing, please appreciate how big and epic it is going to befall the elves in 6 months' time because we've compressed the time span. I want like more characters to actually have a relationship, and that's what makes The Lord of the Rings such a compelling story. It's not just how vast it is, but it's how well you can flesh it out in small details. Why does it matter? Well, because Frodo and Sam are characters, and they have a relationship, and they're a setup and payoff, and it's all really good stuff, and you care about them. They don't spend all their time around a table talking about fucking politics.
It's something Gary talks about here and there with Two Towers, right? When we arrive at Rohan, it feels like a story in motion. There's all kinds of things that have happened, currently happening, and you hit the ground running. You build up and understand Rohan so quickly, and it becomes a part of the mainline story then with all these new characters. It's actually brilliant storytelling, and it's something that they couldn't replicate with a whole season for any of those lines that Platoon just laid out, because I completely agree. The only worthwhile scenes in season 1 that I thought anyway was usually involved Durin or Elrond somewhat. This season, I think there was like 1 or 2 with the dad that I was like, that was okay.
I'm not liking the whole Durin and his dad thing. Like, it's so petty. They're like little children. Like, again, I don't understand how these guys are supposed to be in charge of an entire kingdom.
I felt that way on the dad's half of it. The son's part, I guess I could buy it more because he's not.
The son, maybe if he was a teenager, but like this guy's probably like 300 years old or something.
He's trying to save a race from dying, right? So I can kind of buy a lot of his dialogue.
That was the motive in season 1, but it's no longer the motive in season 2. And the motive in season 2 is completely broken, and it's actually broken by season 1. So if you remember, like the deal that the elves of Eregion offered to the dwarves was, we will supply you for 500 years with all the resources you need in exchange for a little bit of Mithril. The premise in season 2 is that because Mount Doom erupted, which by the way everyone's heard about, don't know how, but they have. Right. Because that happened, they've lost all their light source, and also their farms have corrupted and died, so they've run out of food. And now what they want, for some reason, is magic rings, as opposed to the 500 years of resources the elves promised them in season 1. That's the deal to strike. Well, that's where the argument should be.
And also, I don't understand how this is going to remake entire mountains. Like,
exactly. That's the problem with the motivation. How the fuck do you convince them, we're going to give you rings that will fix your mountain? What the fuck does that mean? How does that work? And
because
it's going to be with the very material that we will provide you. Like, it's our ore.
Like, dwarves can live outside. If their mountain started to collapse, first thing they would do is evacuate Moria.
Yeah, go outside and pick
some... They're going to go outside. They're going to try to live
dwarves traditionally don't deal with, like, airy-fairy ideas of, like, oh, we've got these magical rings that can heal your mountains. Like, no, they're engineers. They understand, like, physical things that you can work with. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And so if you try and sell them on that, they're not going to buy into it. Like, I can get how it works with the elves. It's like, okay, well, the rings of power can, bring trees back to life. That seems like within the realm of their magical abilities. But like this, like making mountains repair themselves, like, no, that's not really what they're do. That's not what they're there for.
Then I was really disappointed that Durin the son was not like he was like, yeah, probably shouldn't do this, not because everything is suspicious as hell right now in Eregion, as well as no Elrond. That's really suspicious too. He doesn't say any of that. He just says, no, I think I agree with your argument from last season that was absolutely retarded, that the elves should just die because that seems to be what fate has chosen. He was like, yeah, maybe you're right. I was like, what the fuck? What a missed opportunity to show the strength of his relationship with Elrond. To be like, he wasn't here. He didn't sanction this. He didn't order it for me. He didn't contact me. Something is wrong.
The book's never really rationalized, like, because in the context of like the rings and like the level of sort of temptation and corruption that goes with them, like they were like the elves and men were a very easy sell. Like the elves were very like high-minded and they were kind of incorruptible, but they only had 3 rings, so their powers were limited. Men were given 9 because they were the most vulnerable to temptation, corruption, the desire for power, conquest, all that stuff. And so they fell very easily under the influence of Sauron's 9 rings and became the Nazgul. The dwarves were a bit of an awkward middle case where like most of the rings didn't like the dwarves didn't get corrupted by them. The rings were just either destroyed or lost, and so they didn't really have much hold on the dwarves as people.
They did, but indirectly. So, like the elves, it's the other thing that Rings of Power mistakes, because the Rings of Power show has decided that the elves want rings because they are actually dying, even though their unique trait is that that's the last thing they fear. In the books, they want the rings to preserve the lands around them. The lands around them are bound by time, and they are not, and they don't like seeing the world around them die, so they want to preserve it. But they're not actually corruptible, so the plan to corrupt them fails because they are not corruptible in that particular way. And they don't need the rings to save the lives of the elves, whatever Rings of Power tells you. The dwarves are different in that, like, the plan was to corrupt them, but they are not corruptible in the way that men are. What they are, though, is fundamentally quite greedy. They like material things. And so the rings did bring them great wealth and success, but it was the fights over the wealth and success that the rings brought them that led to the downfall of many of the dwarven realms and reduced them so much in strength. It's only men whose souls are fundamentally corruptible, because the defining trait of men in Middle-earth is this fear of death. It's the thing that the Numenorians, in the lore at any rate, go to war about eventually. And this is the reason they fall, is they see the elves who are immortal and they envy them because they want the immortality for themselves. And the elves understand that death is a gift. So having the elves in this show fear death and the Numenorians not give a shit is a complete inversion of that. Yeah. You could still do a vaguely accurate thing with the dwarves, but they've started off on an incredibly bad footing by just completely misunderstanding their own setup, never mind the canonical one.
I think my issue with the dwarves in this is that it makes them immature. For all the span of their years, because dwarves live like 300-400 years longer than we do. They seem like children. They seem immature. They're pig-headed. They're stubborn, and they don't even understand the basics of like relationships.
It was really regrettable they didn't give the father a plan for disciplining his son. He literally was just stubborn, and then you have Disa dressing him down
to apologize.
Like having her shout at him in his court while he's sitting on his fucking throne about how petty he is. I was like, she should be disciplined for this. Like, this is insane. And then he's like, I guess you're right. And it's like, oh, that's shit, man.
I think again,
like
the writers,
control,
I think the writers probably just wanted that aesthetic or that writing trope of like, well, the woman has to be the more mature one who like brings these two together.
Yeah, she's like, oh, you knuckleheads, you're both ruining everything.
Basically, yeah. And it's like, well, these people rule entire kingdoms, but sure, yeah, they need you to sort it out for them.
I thought he had more control over the situation, that he had a plan for his son to help him learn something, but he literally didn't. He was just like, I don't know what's happening. My mountain's falling apart too. Where?
Just touching on Durin, when Durin is brought to Eregion to negotiate with Sauron and Celebrimbor about the manufacture of the Dwarven rings, they employ video game warping again to do this same thing they did in season 1.
Yeah.
So they're in Moria. How far is Eregion from Moria?
This has been a problem in season 1. They were teleporting back and forth. It's as if it's on the fucking doorstep.
I don't know. I don't know in terms of the lore how many miles they are away, but it's probably a journey of a few days at least. But it's literally scene to scene. They're discussing in Moria. Oh, there's this offer here's a letter from Celebrimbor making us an offer, and then in like 2 scenes later, they have a cutscene to Gandalf and as female Sam and Frodo, and then next scene he's in Eregion with absolutely no explanation as to how he got there or his journey there. So it's just video game warping. And another scene. Go ahead.
I was just going to say quick for season 1 episode. I want to say episode 2 or 3. But that when Celebrimbor and Elrond are talking about getting workers to help them build this amazing forge, the implication is like, yeah, we're going to get the dwarves. It just hard cuts to being outside Khazad-dûm, and they're just in the exact same clothes, exact same everything. And it's just like, you literally fucking teleported them there. There's no effort to say that they actually had to travel, to the point where I was actually curious of what they wanted us to think. Did they want us to think they just went on a several days or even week journey? I don't know. No houses, no horses, no carriages, no resources, no anything. They're not tied. They don't have different clothing. They don't seem like, whoa, that was a journey. And remember, Elrond's like, I'll figure this out, Celebrimbor. You go on home. It's like, okay, bud, I'll see you later.
They actually were probably better served by doing that, though, than when they did try to make clear what their conception of time was, because then it just sort of reveals itself to be insane in ways that also rebound later on in the show. So when the Numenorians, this is like season 1 episode, I want to say 6. Which one am I reviewing at the moment? 5 or 6. They sight land and they say, right, well, we can sail the ships up into the mountains in a day, and then we can ride all the way to the village in another day. So they've given us a very clear indication of the time they expect us to believe is elapsing. The problem is, not only did Rings of Power itself publish the maps that it's using with a scale on them, but they're based on the maps that Tolkien created, which also have scales on them. Do you want to know how far it is to sail from where they were up into the mountains? By the way, by inventing a whole tributary for a river that doesn't exist, 450 miles. They were traveling on sailing ships upriver into mountains at about an average speed of 50 miles an hour. And that obviously doesn't work. But because you've established that you can get in and out of Mordor in a day, when in season 2, Isildur is traipsing through Mordor on his horse, I'm thinking, well, I'm not concerned for you because literally 12 hours time, you're out, you're fine. There's no, why are we trying to pretend like this is some arduous journey when we know that it's not?
Dude, Mordor's been going for like a week at most, and I love that they've got a section where they're like, nobody goes to that part of the woods ever.
Yeah, they're trying to fast track their own lore for this place.
Like,
That's the Black Forest.
It's the Genesis, from Star Trek 2.
Yeah, it's like the whole place.
Like the planet coalesced in a few hours. Mordor, same thing.
It was actually reminding me of I was getting like PTSD flashbacks to seeing Alien Romulus, where it goes from a baby to a giant monster in the space of like 3 minutes. That's Mordor in this show. It goes from this foundling nation that has just been established to a fairly well established society with names for everything in world in the space of literally days. Like, it makes no sense at all.
I love how I like the idea that there's maybe some guy just going around speed running all of this stuff, like, that place over there, that's the Black Forest, like, and this is the lore that surrounds it. And then just runs to the next settlement. You don't want to go over there, that's the Forbidden Mountain.
I think this is a fundamental problem with modern fantasy writing on television, because I really do think the writers think it doesn't matter when they're writing, because we just need to get the characters from one place to another. You saw that in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek films, for example. There's no travel time. It's like, yep, we have to get all these cadets on the ship and get to Vulcan because it's being attacked, as if Vulcan's around the corner. Yeah. And in this show, and what I don't think what people realize, and Game of Thrones had this problem as it went along, suddenly the stories they're telling, it was inconvenient to have to deal with the geographical space that is in the world that they're set in, so they would just forget about it, like, whatever.
Well, so it's such a shame, because I think a bad writer sees travel time as a burden to try and explain, while a good writer sees it as an opportunity for stakes.
100%. 100%. And when you watch this, it's all part of the fact that I don't believe, it's not just verisimilitude, I don't believe anything in this show. I don't believe the characters, their motivations. I don't believe the lands. I don't believe the geography. I don't believe powers. I don't believe motivations, because none of it, they've not given it to me. They've not delivered it to me in a believable manner. The way that Peter Jackson's movie in the first in Fellowship lays out everything to where you believe it.
Yeah. And there's outright immersion shattering aspects of it as well. So, for example, Isildur is stabbed in the leg. It's quite a bad wound. Like, it's a life-threatening wound, and he has to put a tourniquet on it. And the script just forgets about it. He's fine, and we never see his recovery. And like, it never addresses how he recovered from it. Okay, you put on a tourniquet. Did you see a doctor or the equivalent, a healer or something? Is it turned gangrene? What? No, the script just completely forgets that he has a potentially fatal wound on his thigh. In fact, he gets the wound, and then he turns to the guard and he says, "Oh, I think I know where my family is. They're waiting for me." And she says, "Look, I have a map." She literally pulls out a map. Then the next scene, he's on a horse, which doesn't make sense because she was just attacked by orcs. The orcs would have taken the horse, but whatever. Let's leave that aside for a minute. How did he ride a fucking horse that far with a horrible thigh wound? He would have bled to death.
They had to work in the modern dialogue for this as well, where they have the argument about like, oh, you're supposed to leave the knife in. And it's like, well, how do you know that? Because you've never been fucking stabbed before. And you've just stated that you've never been stabbed before. Is it just like that's what a modern writer heard? And so they decided to make that a bit of a quip in universe.
I figured that was because they were like much easier.
Quippy about it. It's like,
oh yeah, absolutely, it's fucking marvelly. But I assumed that they did that as a cheat because they don't have to fucking have the knife stay in. You know, they're like, we want to.
But make it in like
Well, I know,
is a
but
good
like you shouldn't
opportunity.
even say that. Like, it doesn't need
Yeah,
to
no,
be
I got you.
said in universe. Like, it's just bullshit.
Like, here's a
And-
simple little plot for them. You know, she stabs him, and it looks okay at first, but then it turns not gangrene because then they'd have to chop it off. But he gets really sick, and then the girl has to go and get him fixed and get him healed, and that'll build their characterization and the relationship a little bit instead of having them sit around a fucking campfire talking about characters we have never seen before.
Or how
be,
about she doesn't stab him at all, right? Like, she tries
Crazy.
to take a swing at him, he overpowers her, and like, yeah, then realizes, oh, she's not an enemy. She realizes that he's not an orc, and they make friends. They move on to the next scene to do whatever they
No.
need to do then. Because if you don't want to have that character have a physical impairment from the injury they've sustained, don't fucking do it, because it achieves
Right.
nothing.
I hate to do this. I really do. But Despot, did you see all 3 episodes?
I did. I suffered through all 3. It was quite an experience.
There is a scene where, because it's the scene where you find out how Bronwyn died, which is very funny, by the way. He is getting it attended to by Bronwyn's son, and he says, "Did you learn this from your mum?" And she's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, I did." Some whatever shit. He's like, he's like stitching it up and giving it medicine or whatever. So I think that's the answer to the question of how that got solved, even though it's incredibly unsatisfying. And like I said, it's packaged with him going, yeah, turns out orc arrows, they kill you slowly and later. Like she was totally fine in the end of season 1. And then they're just like, nah, she died, lol. Why did they recast it?
Why is the actress not in this again? Like, I don't know the lore.
Nothing. It's not recast. It's not rewritten. She's just not in it. I don't think they ever said exactly why she's not coming back. My theory is that they just ran out of things to do for her. Because which is wildly unplanned if you consider how much time they devoted to creating her character and bigging it up all the way through season 1. And they went through the whole, oh my goodness, she's injured. Is she gonna die? And then they have to go back and they find what they think is the corpse, and it's, oh no, she actually died. But then she comes up behind them and it's so triumphant. She survived. She's so much better. She leads her people to Pelagia. Only in season 2 it's like, oh yeah, she did die after all. I didn't notice she was getting worse.
So, to be absolutely clear,
got the big sad.
At the end of season 1, she's in the meeting with Galadriel, the queen, Elendil. She's like talking to him about what's happened here and how to recover. It's like they make her an incredibly important character. It was really badly done in season 1. And like Platoon just said, they bait her death. Like, no, she's not only fine, she's healing people. She's on top of everything. Beginning of season 1, they knew people forgot her. They showed a flash of her fucking face when they had her funeral. They were like, "This is why do you just
remember her?" There's actually a lot.
Just recast her. It doesn't matter.
This is what I mean. This goes back to the point I was making earlier about. I think they know that a lot of people didn't watch season 1, or at least didn't get to the end of season 1, because there is a lot of flashbacks to characters and major events that happened towards the end of season 1. That a lot of people probably didn't see because they just tuned out of the show, and they're hoping, hey, we can catch you up on this, and we're going to offer you a whole bunch of new exciting stuff to keep you hooked. But there isn't anything.
I have a question for the panel, because I was trying to put myself into the shoes of a normie when I was watching this and think, okay, if I was a normie, you know, the average sort of audience that Amazon are clearly going for, at what point would I check out? At what point would I say I fucking can't anymore? This is too much of a slog. And I thought,
monster,
like
right at the beginning.
I think, you know, if I was a normie, like I might have gotten through that bit, but I think that all the sections with not Gandalf and the fucking Harfoots trudging through the desert, that would have done me in. I would just say, no, this is garbage. I need to get out of here. Yeah,
3 episodes.
I struggled with that. Like, if I wasn't doing it for this, for open bar and reviewing it and stuff, I never would get through it.
Absolutely.
I had to force
what
myself
percentage?
To watch it.
What percentage of the starting audience? And I know we like to shit on them, and it's fun to speak hyperbolically, but in all seriousness, what percentage of the audience finishes this 3-episode arc?
Oh, if we go,
it's gotta be fucking tiny, man.
I think we're going to cut at least half of them out.
I was going to go further than that. I was going to say it cannot possibly be more than 20% of people remain for the 3 episodes.
Man, just getting 3 episode 2 is like crossing the desert.
Yeah, I already, yeah.
I would tend to agree with you, Platoon. I don't think, you know, the common wisdom is if a show, I think it was like 70% or 60% or something, a finish rate. The fact that this had a less than 40% finish rate of the first season for viewers, that 40% of the viewers, less than 40% finished, that show would have been canceled on any other network. No questions asked. And they're bringing it back, and I'm wondering, well, of the 37% of the people that did finish season 1 that are watching this, I know they're not necessarily normies. I'm curious how many they had left.
Yeah.
If you were one of that 37% that finished Rings of Power, the thing about this show is, you know, a great TV show leaves you, or a great movie, or a great book, or a great album leaves you elated in some way when you're done. You feel good. You feel like, wow, that was great. And you're excited. I've never felt great watching this show. I've never, I mean, I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but I watch this show and there's nothing satisfying about watching it. Somebody wrote to me yesterday and said, well, if you like the Silmarillion, there's interesting things in it. I'm like, it's not just a touchstone thing for me. It's like, I want to get wrapped up in the lives of characters and their stories. And I don't feel that there is any characters and stories who I'm captivated by or wrapped up by. I don't think I've ever seen a TV show that is so antithetical to pleasing its audience. I don't know what they're trying to do from one minute to the next, because there are no fun scenes. You know, somebody mentioned earlier, like when Sam and Frodo, being the heart of fellowship, there's that great scene when they get to the end of the Shire. And Sam says, I've never been further than this point. And they're in the middle of a field. This show would never stop and do that. It would never stop and give you a moment between two people that everybody could identify with. Somebody's about to step beyond their comfort zone. That's what the point of that scene is. This show has none. It has no human scenes. I mean, it can be what I mean to say is that audience scenes where we can look at fantasy characters and empathize and understand them, because they're doing things that are analogous to what we do in our own lives, like stepping beyond our comfort zone. And this show has none of that. There's nothing where I can connect to it on any level, other than by trying to think about archetypes from other fantasy shows I've seen that aren't even necessarily Lord of the Rings. And I've never seen a show ever in my life that's made me feel this way.
Well, I think, as you say, like every character kind of comes across as a pale imitation of what we already had in Lord of the Rings. So if we take like Nori and Poppy, right? If you compare them to Sam and Frodo had such amazingly well-defined characters that sparked off each other and like were in conflict with each other in a lot of ways, but also complemented each other perfectly. You know, Frodo was the guy who had been entrusted with this enormous burden that had the weight of the entire world resting on his shoulders, that knew exactly what he had to do, the smarter, more educated, more intelligent one. But then you had Sam, who was the faithful servant, but was in many ways braver and more like self-sacrificing than Frodo ever was. They sparked off each other perfectly. When I look at Nori and Poppy, I can't differentiate them. They're just basically the same person. They've got the same basic personality.
I didn't even know that was a name. I've never.
I don't know which one is
I only know it because I've got fucking Wikipedia, right? I can look at the episode.
But also, there's nothing going on with them.
They've got nothing to differentiate them. So when I see them put into peril, going into different situations, I don't fucking care what happens to them, because they're not characters. They're not people. They're not fleshed out. They don't have lives. They don't have motivations. They are just two actors on screen doing a very poor impersonation of an Irish accent.
Because it's not their story. That's sort of the problem. At the moment, they are there as kind of an excuse for the audience to be there in order that the audience can watch what happens to Gandalf. That's the only reason they're there. There was like occasional hints of a story for them, like threatened to emerge in season 1, but that hasn't come to anything. And we're almost halfway through season 2 already. I don't think it will go anywhere.
The first 3 episodes of season 1, everybody who ever met Nori just repeated the line, you know, she's always wanted more. She's such a crazy little gal. Oh, she's always doing this, always doing that.
She's always trying to break free of the constraints of our civilization.
Because when I was rewatching the first few episodes, I was with Fringy, and we were getting actually furious fucking hearing every single goddamn line that related to Nori. Was like, you know, she's a girl who'll just blah, blah. And we were like, George Lucas did this in one shot. You didn't need to say this 20 fucking times and waste my entire life. Also, Drinker, I was sharing a screen, I was going to say, in relation to nothing enjoyable that ever happens in this show, I have a counter. Everyone, I'm pretty sure, loves this part. And
what is it in private?
I'm sharing screens.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see it pull up. Yeah,
this part is fucking great.
Wait, I'm going to try and pause it there. Can we pause it?
Yeah, I'll pause it, yeah.
Funny. Oh, it's beautiful.
I lost my shit rewatch. I'd completely forgotten.
You know, I was going to say another thing. Just I'm not done shitting on the Harfoots just yet.
No.
You know how the hobbits were so likable because like they embodied like much as they did in the books, like Tolkien's interpretation of like merry England. You know, and like they love like going to the pub and just socializing with their friends, like living their like relatively simple lives. They love food, you know. But then we get the Harfoots, and like, was this some kind of weird intentional thing that they live off snails and bugs and stuff whenever we see them in this? Like, why?
The same meals as Sauron.
They just, it's like the show goes out of their way to make them as unappealing and disgusting as possible.
Do you know what was really bizarre, by the way? Because listeners in the chat, most of whom haven't seen this, what happens is, so Frodelma and Gandalf are just walking aimlessly through Middle Earth, and then female Sam is following them, and then Gandalf turns to Frodelma and says, "Oh, we are being followed." And I was thinking, wait a minute, why is female Sam following them? Why doesn't she just run up and say, "Hi, Frodelma, it's me, Samiz. As you know, we were friends together in the the trailer trash hobbits." Why does she follow them? Why doesn't she just walk up and say, "Oh, hey, I came after you"?
What was the trap
why is she
as well? What was the trap
trap
that he laid for her? I genuinely don't understand this. I was making my brain hurt. Because it's literally a rock tied to a string, but somehow it like entraps her. I don't understand.
Why is she follow? She's not Gollum. She has nothing to hide. She's not sinister.
And they've traveled a long way. I mean, in that journey time, he's learned the entire English language. Like, she's been following them for ages. I don't know why she's only just caught up to them. It's just, yeah.
And she just happens to bring a map that gives them precise instructions for how to navigate through this wasteland.
And it takes them literally about a minute to figure out that the songs sung by the trailer trash hobbits as they were walking around, it takes them 1 minute to figure out that is instructions to get them through this specific piece of territory.
Can I make it a slight admission as well? I don't actually know where they're going or why.
Oh, well, they tried to fill you in on that.
Do the writers.
In season 1, they looked at the star map and like Gandalf wanted to find that. But just in case we'd forgotten, he has a dream of a stick, and that's where he's going.
Yep.
So, like,
yeah, that's what he got. It's like, so he has to go.
Stick.
So he has to go to a place where he can see stars to get a stick that will make just everything fine.
Are we in general agreement that the single worst sort of plot in this show is the Gandalf and Frodelma and Samiz plot?
I don't necessarily think so. I have a nasty feeling it's going to be Isildur and whatever the latest new unnamed female character is, because I don't see that going anywhere. I don't see it being anything other than a massive distraction that's just designed to keep Isildur off like the main trail, basically. At least the Gandalf stuff might theoretically lead somewhere important, whereas they're keeping Isildur in this holding pattern because they can't do anything with him.
It's tricky because I feel like the Gandalf thing is so untethered from everything else that's going on, and it has been throughout the entire first season, that I can't get invested in it at all. And I know Gandalf's obviously going to make it, so I don't care where this is going.
They are baiting his name to the point where I'm expecting them to come across a creature that he really likes, and they'll go, "Oh, that's a Dalf." They kind of gander around, you know, the little Dalfs. They gander, and then he's going to be like, "They Gandalf." And I'm going to want to kill myself. Like, that'll be it. And it's going to be horrible. I hated his line about how, I can't remember what the alternative was, because it's something else that I liked from some of the show. But he says, you don't get named, you just have one. That's how it works. There's a name out there, you have it, it's yours. I was like, what the fuck? This is the complete opposite of stuff that I actually like. I can't remember the last thing that came across, but so many stories do this, where they say, your name comes from those who love you. Like, you're named by those who love you. That's like a really nice sentiment, you know, and it usually has some kind of thematic value with whatever we're looking into. And you talk about friends, family, or even at the point of, say, you have a really shit name for someone who hates you, you can then change it from, something else. But like him just saying, nah, I'm pretty sure I have a name. It's just like, okay.
He's a signed Gandalf at birth. Yeah.
My theory is that he's going to run into two diverse twin girls called Gan and Dalf, who were brutally murdered by Jedi, and he's going to call himself Gandalf in their honor.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised. I feel like we're at the same level of writing as the Acolyte with this. Like that's
They're gonna do
that's the
something
real
dumb as shit.
terrifying thing about this.
Fuck me, it's actually at that level. Like it's in that league. It is.
Like it'll be two town names, and the two signs break, and the two ends of the town name slam together, and it says Gandalf, and he's like, "Oh my god, that's it."
Are you guys really excited for the power struggle that's going on in Numenor as well, where we got like discount
where
Karl
the
Marx fucking
the main plotters decide to openly discuss their conspiracy?
Oh
in
my
the middle
god, the
of a
treason!
fucking bar
in a
bar.
Could happen.
I also got really disappointed with that girl from season 1 who's like, I actually think I have the ultimate plan to depose the queen or to sabotage it. And then that guy is like, that queen got crippled in a battlefield defending and saving soldiers for this war to try and help men. So don't fucking disparage her. He walks away. Then she goes, so anyway, my plan to commit treason. I was like, what was the... Okay, I guess that makes no difference to these people. Like, I'm fine. I thought it was so
She's such a baffling character as well. The Isildur's sister. I mean, she was baffling all the way through season 1 because in season, like, even though she's Isildur's sister, she's Elendil's daughter. That entire family, you know, is like predisposed to love and admire the elves, but for some reason she's not. And I watched it came on after episode 3. You know, they do that sort of the interview with a select number of the cast where they're supposed to be really enthusiastic about the deep characters they're playing. And she was asked, you know, what's going on, and she said, "Oh, I think I can't remember her name. My character thinks that Elendil isn't honoring the family enough, and so because like he's not mourning Isildur, who I think is dead. But that can't motivate her in season 1 when Isildur is not yet dead, and yet she hasn't really changed as a person since then, except that she's got access to the Palantir vision, and nobody apparently checks that room, so she can bring it and throw it at people, and it's just." I don't understand why she's in the show. I don't understand what like her motivation is, where that comes from, why she disagrees with everyone else in her own family about everything, and she's baffling. I don't understand her at all.
She has a huge effect on the plotline now, just because of that. She happened to be shown the room with the Palantir in it, and she happened to believe and construct a plan that could absolutely destroy everything. You know, I was thinking about, because the guy that told them to stop doing treason was he was made lieutenant, right, in season 1 because he managed to scratch Galadriel. I was thinking about, like, what if he just
forgot that guy existed.
What if he just told Elendil? He was like, hey man, just so you know, Pharazôn, his son, and your daughter are all conspiring against the queen. Just FYI, I just thought I'd mention it.
And the Numenorians are such a pack of fucking morons. And they are literally they took our jobs. They're that mean.
Yeah.
Because they're in the throne room, and the queen goes in, and they're like, we don't like you, queen. And then she makes a brief speech, and they say, you're all right, queen. You're all right. And then, you know, woman with large breasts shows up with the Palantir, and she says, look, everyone, she's using elven magic. And they don't say, hold on, can we verify this? What is she holding? They just immediately believe her and go, she's using elven magic. Get her, everybody. And they literally, like, try to get her, you know, like, at schoolyard.
All of that's irrelevant, though. Like, the entire conspiracy thing is completely irrelevant. Because the eagle comes, right? Like, the ruler of Numenor is chosen by who is standing closest to the window when eagle comes.
Yeah.
You don't actually need a conspiracy.
But then and then all it takes is for some guy to just go, Pharazôn.
You took your jobs.
We needed.
Oh, well, I guess it's me then.
We needed Elendil to whisper to her, the fucking eagle's here, go, 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 go. And then she just blindly wanders around the room. Wait, where's the eagle? Tell me where I'll stand closer to the eagle.
Because, how come she's able to walk down a flight of steps, like, unaided, like, and she's totally fine, and then she needs guidance for how to, like, grip the fucking scepter thing, or, like, walk up the steps.
I could accept that. I would imagine that she practiced it off screen as a means of impressing people.
Well,
so it's
again,
kind of a plot hole, but it is explicable.
And I think if you'd shown us that would have been a nice little insight into her character. Like, she wanted to portray the facade of someone who's still able-bodied. Like, okay, that would tell us a little bit about her, but they just launch right into it, and it doesn't give us anything. Then it's just
that would have been much
misstep.
more compelling. Like, if you'd cut out the Gandalf female Salmon Frodo shite and just had that scene in there, and maybe she's having a conversation about politics while she's doing it, it would have been much more compelling.
It's funny when you think about all the plot lines from this show that you could probably just kill and like it wouldn't suffer in the slightest. Like the fucking Don Lemonless like
that was
subplot.
so cringe.
That character can just go. He could just die immediately.
Yeah.
No one would care.
Like the
Dude,
first
his
thing they need
arrival,
to do.
the show loves him. When he came in, the show was like, "Look, it's him," and we're all like, "I don't care about him."
When he explodes through a fucking spin like twirly thing through like the back of a cart, like I don't even understand how that works.
I watched this twice and I can't figure it out. So maybe I missed something that one of you guys saw. So basically, Isildur and the girl see a man who is wounded on the road next to a cart. And they walk over and give him a piece of bread. And all of a sudden, all the bandits jump out because it was a trap, you see. And then the bandits seem to come out of the cart that the man was leaning against. But then Don Lemonlass explodes from that same cart. But how did they not see Don Lemonlass in there when they hid in there themselves?
He does sort of jump behind it and then explodes through it.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
The Numenorian stuff, though, one of the things I've always loved about the story of the Lord of the Rings is you have to have disparate nations come together. There's got to be an alliance, an alliance of men. We know what happens in the Second Age. We have to see that occur. And now we're in a state of where the entire civilizations of Middle Earth are kind of in a disarray. They're not trusting one another. And what I'm missing is the kernels of all of these people sort of getting their act together. I mean, we know what happens in Numenor, but I feel like they're missing a real opportunity here. It's so, they just jump around so much that I never feel that I understand what is actually happening in any of the places that they're in at any one time.
Yeah.
And I just don't get it. I just don't get what I'm supposed to think. Like, look, again, you go back, if you're going to use, this is what I don't understand. You have the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies as a template. You have the reason, you have, Theoden, why he's reluctant to get involved in this. War is upon you, whether you wish it or not. And you really understand all of the things that are going on. In this show, I never understand anything that's going on. And am I just dumb?
I think the writers are dumb, and that's the problem. Like with the Lord of the Rings, the Peter Jackson trilogy, they had immense amounts of source material to draw from, and their problem was just understanding what stuff to cut out. And I think, by and large, they made very good decisions in that regard. With this, they have got very sparse source material that gives you a vague outline of the things that happened. And they are having to construct an entire narrative themselves. They're having to create characters out of nothing. They don't have that creative ability.
No, and they also don't have the narrative. I don't think they have a narrative. I don't think this is the kind of thing that with the amount of money they spent, they should have spent a year plotting this show. And it should be one of the most brilliantly plotted TV shows of all time. And I know the guys who, the two showrunners had barely done anything. And it really shows. I mean, I just don't feel like Numenor should be one of the most interesting places that we can be at in terms of what happens to it and in the lore. And yet, nope.
But they're playing those beats in reverse. That's the peculiar thing, is that even with the sparse material they do have, they're playing the beats that were available to them backwards. Because if you read the anything about the fall of Numenor, they invade to take out Sauron in an alliance with the elves. They capture Sauron, and Sauron is brought back to Numenor at basically the beginning of its triumphant fall. That's near the end of the Numenorian story. Rings of Power gave it to us right at the beginning of the story, when he doesn't even want to be there. He has no particular motive to be there. All of the manipulations are around him, and he's not got a huge amount of agency. Then they send everybody away from Numenor, and then they have to keep cutting back to it to show, oh, by the way, stuff's still happening over here. But there's no actual through line. There's no character through line in particular, because Sauron isn't there anymore. They sent him away for no reason. If they'd actually just stuck to the basic ordering of the material they were allowed to adapt, it would be a much more coherent story, which would naturally lead to this hugely climactic end when Sauron is captured, seemingly brought there as a prisoner, and then works his nefarious ways on Pharazôn to corrupt him into the evil man that he becomes. That's a fairly simple kind of story to tell compared to the one they've chosen to try and tell. And it's not even as though having no narrative or not much narrative interspersing the beats they could adapt is an excuse when you see House of the Dragon doing so well with source material that's not immensely narrative heavy itself. They are combining loads and loads of fairly disparate beats through like a book within a book, basically. And this is the broad brush strokes of history, which are available to Rings of Power in the form of the appendices, but they just lack the ability to turn it into a story.
They've gone around in a giant circle as a result of that. So at the start of when we were first introduced in Numenor, it was this island nation that was isolationist and in the midst of a political struggle internally. And they've gone around in a big circle. And what do we have now? We have a small island nation, isolationist and in the midst of a political struggle. It's just the exact same thing again. They've gone in a big circle. It's completely pointless. Only now we don't have any stakes because Sauron's gone and he's not there. So why should anyone give a shit?
Well, because we have
Sorry.
No, my point was just going to be that we have a really hot, big-breasted actress who's playing one of the main characters there. So, of course, that's a pretty valid reason to care about it. That's all we got in terms of this show, though.
Can we talk about Celebrimbor?
Jesus Christ! He's such a moron.
Absolute idiot.
He is supposed to be one of the greatest minds in all of Middle Earth.
He's getting slaughtered every single scene. He doesn't get to be a person at all. He's a little amoeba.
The script can't seem to decide if he's a bumbling sort of buffoon who's just like entranced by anyone who shows him a bit of kindness, or a mad scientist who's like reaching for things beyond his comprehension, or like some like wannabe politician who wants to get involved in like the power struggles of the elves. He's everything and nothing because the script doesn't know what to do with him.
When they had that scene where he goes to see Sauron and he comes out with this I tweet about this elven style makeshift nonsense umbrella. And I was like, that doesn't look practical at all. And then they show the fucking shot and he's soaking wet underneath it. I was like,
bring that up when I was trying to swallow my whiskey.
Motherfucker can't even make an umbrella. Like you kidding me? What a goober show. That is so funny. I think I'd be like, that's nitpicking. It's like, that is precisely the kind of shit that could yank me out. Like the greatest fucking creator of all of Lord of the Rings is like, I don't fucking know, an umbrella.
He's got this goofy guy walking along behind him, like holding it up. Just walk in the fucking rain. Who cares?
That's what I'm saying, though. I think they actually got the department to make it, but it didn't fucking work. He got wet anyway.
He had to pretend as if he wasn't wet, as if it didn't matter.
It's so stupid.
Yeah, that is one of the better scenes now.
I think that scene probably encapsulates everything that the Rings of Power is.
I have a prediction. I have a prediction, by the way. You know when the trees in Linden, the trees come back to life?
Yeah.
And Galadriel looks up at them with this big cheesy smile. That smile is going to be on so many thumbnails.
I think the actress probably had to practice that quite carefully because she managed to smile without looking like a crazy lady that wants to make a suit out of your skin. So I think she did pretty well there, as opposed to the horse riding scene, which was just absolute horror personified.
It was. And Celebrimbor, though, like I know what they're doing. I know what they're trying to do, and I know they think it's cool, but it's so broken in every way. It's like, well, it's broken in multiple ways. Like Galadriel should have told him that Halbrand is Sauron. Why the hell didn't she do that? I haven't rewatched the last episode of the first season.
It's lucky she sent like one guy on horseback who got killed. So.
It's terrible.
I was wondering the same thing.
If you rewatch the last episode, her fear is that she'll be blamed for having spared. He says, if you tell them, then they'll know that you're the reason I'm alive, which is something Gil-galad does say to her, but as if that would have stopped her, as if that would be any fucking reason to not say, bro, he's Sauron. He is Sauron.
The person that she was trying to warn against all through, like she was prepared to be sent away back to Valinor for warning about Sauron. I knew the explanation would be something massively self-serving, but even then, after that point, you get Celebrimbor is like, he has to ask Halbrand if the rings worked, as though he would know. But like, ask yourself, do you feel like you're dying still? You should know if that's worked or not, because that was the whole point of making the rings. And why are you taking the word of this random hobo who's just turned up on your doorstep and refused to leave? And then when he transforms into like the devil and then into an angel, isn't that at least a little bit suspicious?
Why I would be fucking terrified of that guy. I would be like, you couldn't get me within like 20 fucking nautical miles of him.
There's fucking lightning, rain, the windows and doors are flapping open, and all the dark, like the lights go out. And he's like, "I am not who you think," and he's like, "Oh yeah, an angel, definitely." This is what angels do. I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure.
he literally steps out of his fire after conjuring these terrifying images, and he says, "All right, Celebrimbor, let's get to work on those rings of power." Yeah, and Celebrimbor's just like, "Yep,
Oh my
sounds
God,
good
your
to me."
name's
It's like, I am the bringer of gifts. Well, I'm convinced.
I buy it. So that for me is possibly the most baffling part of the whole plot of the 3 episodes put together. When I figured out, because it's hard to gather everything with how badly they explain. Sometimes you like tune out, and so you're just like, what's happening? And you have Galadriel, Gil-galad, Elrond. Pretty much everybody agrees. You know that Celebrimbor, he might right now be manipulated by Sauron. Right now, he might be right there, right now, making rings with him that'll destroy the whole universe. And another person goes, "Yeah, true, yeah." And Elrond's like, "Yep, corruption, yeah." All right, anyway, dinner or. And then they're like, "Oh, we'll send a guy," and then guy goes and dies. It's like weird. Celebrimbor hasn't sent any emails back. It's like, I don't know. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, how are you not all amassing everyone to charge at a regular, going to see what's happened to him? Is he okay? He's literally the source of whether or not you will live or die, and you think Sauron is on his doorstep. And the funniest part is Sauron was literally on his doorstep for several days, being like, "Hello, like, let me in, please." He's like, "I don't know if I can trust you."
When he goes to Celebrimbor to try to get in, Celebrimbor is resolute. We're not letting that guy in. I don't care if he's wounded. He can fuck off. And it takes literally 1 minute of screen time for Celebrimbor to change his mind and be like, "Oh no, you're my friend. You're my bro. Come in. Let's eat together by the fire."
The plague hard to get. He's like, I don't want to come in anymore. Then Gilbert's like, no, don't leave, no.
It's like a toddler's behavior. Like a toddler, like if you're playing with when I'm playing with my son, if he does something like he grabs a toy out of my hand and I think it's really, I was like, "Well, I don't want to play with you anyway," and I turn around, "No, play with me." It's literally the behavior of a toddler.
Oh, so awful. And yeah, I couldn't believe that. Had they just, I couldn't believe that Elrond wouldn't basically have told them, "You can direct me to do whatever you want, but I'm leaving in the next 5 minutes to go and save Celebrimbor. Like, for all I know, I'm going to be the only thing that stands between him and a backstab from Sauron." But no, he's like, "I want to build a boat. I'm just going to go carve a boat. That's what I'm going to do."
Yeah.
Meanwhile, it's Galadriel who has like the strong motive to go there and rescue him in particular, because she put him in that situation and she's the one most concerned about Sauron. And yet when Gil-galad says, "You will have a team," and she says, "Great, I'm going," and he says, "But it will not be led by you. It's gonna be fucking what's his name, Elrond." And she that upsets her, as though that's the thing that's foremost of her mind. "Oh my, I've been supplanted at the head of my own team to go and fight the literal devil."
Yeah, it's
that's
like you're
what
still
I'm concerned
going
about.
there. Like,
There
you've
are
still got
so
your
many
chance to take him on.
Dynamics at play that are fucked, because for one thing, right, Elrond shouldn't, didn't Elrond almost plunge the elves into permanent destruction from Gil-galad's point of view? A treasonous act. He disobeyed his king, and for days nearly caused
100%.
the entirety.
That's just been forgotten about now.
No consequences. Okay. He's like, "Yeah, you're chill. I get it. I get why you did it." And then the other side of it, of course, is that he's like, "You can't go on your own, or so to speak, because Sauron might corrupt you, Galadriel." And I think even on some level, she recognizes, "Oh, okay." And it's like, okay, she's not your only person, man. And you're gonna spend days until you convince the pouty Elrond to go with her. You're gonna risk Celebrimbor's whole forge. I can't take it seriously. None of it. It's absolute nonsense and melodrama.
Yeah. On the plus side, though, John Gates has got the perfect antidote to this. He says, "I'll consume this episode as Boogie consumes Diet Mountain Dew. For as feces flow like a river after such a drink, your words shall wash over me, and my knowledge shall stand as a mountain on such dew." Okay, I can't Rings of Power talk anymore. That's actually better than about 95% of the dialogue in the show.
Yeah.
It's much more considered.
That's a terrifying thing. This show, man. Honestly, I can't wait for what the next 5 weeks have in store for us. It's going to be quite the ride.
For people who are more familiar with how the story goes, what do you think their big season payoff will be?
Presumably, at the end of the season, the dwarves are going to get their 7 rings, because the first season ends with the elves getting their rings. So I would assume that this season will be the dwarves getting their rings at the end.
I think they might actually go the whole hog and give us the 9 rings as well.
So
I think
so
they
we
might
get
try and,
yes, the Newman. Okay, so
I think they
they're
might try
setting
and
up.
cram all that in.
What's the name of the Eagle King with the gigantic eyebrows?
Pharazon.
They're setting Pharazon up as the corrupt man who leads the charge for the Nine Rings, and then
So
yeah, he brings the Nine Rings to Numenor. That's the point of that plot, and then the dwarves get their rings, and then they get straight on in season 3 to the war, I suppose.
No, because did the Nine Rings end up in Numenor, or were they spread over in Middle Earth? Because like there's various kingdoms throughout like the northern part of Middle Earth that I think some of them end up with.
I think they're going to simplify it. I think they're going to simplify it and just give all 9 rings to Numenor.
I think it will probably culminate in the fall of Numenor with this season. I think that's what they're going to show us.
I know they have the Battle of Eregion. I think I saw the Battle of Eregion in one of the trailers.
I do think, though, that you're going to see all the rings be distributed. I agree with that. And I think the fall of Numenor is probably... Because what else is going to happen in this show?
Because they've already forged... Yes. We're what, 3 episodes in? They've already forged the Dwarven rings. So we've got the 7. So we've got another 5 episodes to play with to get the 9. So, yeah.
Also, I mean, it was a 5-season deal. I mean, they have to save something. The rings, I mean, I could see them simplifying it and sending all 9 rings to Numenor, absolutely, and that being the thing that establishes the corruption. I think only 3 of them were supposed to be Numenorian, and then like you had men from all of the rest of the world. In fact, if Waldrick hadn't died in episode 1, he could have had one of the rings, but alas,
I loved seeing him come back. I was so happy to see old man Waldrick. Yeah,
he was having a great old time, wasn't he?
He was loving it. He was like a little orc torturer man. He was like, "Fuck it, I'm alive."
That was my favorite. I will say, unironically, I enjoyed that part of the show. I felt that was quite good. It was very simple. It's been done many, many times before, but it was fun. That was the only fun part of the show for me, watching him enjoy torturing people.
Him in season 1, he was a goofster. He was just evil. He's like an asshole.
He operated the Rube Goldberg machine, so that was enough. Like
this guy's
literally responsible for the whole history of Middle Earth. Like that one random dude.
Had he failed his mission, the whole timeline would have been different. So he deserves more respect, I think. You know.
Yeah. Anyway, well, that is Rings of Power. That was the experience that was. But you know, I was just thinking about other things that have come and gone. The Acolyte was a thing that we thought was dead and buried, but apparently the cope around it being cancelled is just never ending. And it seems like
Drinker, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to correct you. It wasn't cancelled because they didn't make it. They didn't actually contract it for more than 1 season. It just wasn't renewed.
Okay, sorry. So the Acolyte was non-renewed for season 2. And everyone was like super sad about that. But Amanda Stenberg decided to pitch in with her comments about this because the narrative is what's important, I suppose, at times like this, because there always has to be a convenient scapegoat and a convenient explanation for why things didn't get renewed. It's not just because they were garbage and no one watched them. There has to be other reasons.
To bounce off what Despot just said as well, I thought it was funny because I saw that sentiment around as well. But Amanda in her little video says it was cancelled like 3 different times.
Like, let's see what
look at the show. The show was begging for a season 2. It had all these little cliffhangers at the end and mystery boxes. It's like, of course, it was fucking cancelled.
Yeah. And she posted like this 8-minute long video, which is just like a rambling, incoherent word salad. But I tried to pick out the relevant section here, so I'll let you guys, digest.
Our Star Wars show has been canceled, and I'm gonna be transparent and say that it's not a huge shock for me. Of course, I live in the bubble of my own reality, but for those who aren't aware, there has been a rampage of vitriol that we have faced since the show was even announced, when it was still just a concept and when no one.
I do have to say as well, like the rampage of vitriol, I think probably stems from the fact that like the pitch for the show sounded awful and most people were just kind of laughing at it.
What I find really funny is because we would have been there for the entire, so to speak, life cycle of the show from announcement to, cancellation. I would have said, like, really far back, everyone was criticizing it under premise for fucking with the lore that's established as a result of the other films and different things that are already known. And then it did that, and everyone got mad at it for it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Is anyone going to appreciate that people were annoyed because they broke canon, and then they said, "Don't worry, it won't break canon," and then it did? Like these, obviously, this will be swept under the carpet compared to the vitriolic hate comments. It's just like, yeah, I guess so.
Because every single piece of criticism I've seen about this show, like, it was all centered around the terrible writing, the horrible character choices, like the incoherent plot, like the meandering pace. Like, none of it was really centered around the ethnicity of the main character. No one seemed to have an issue with that. But that's the thing that is now getting zeroed in on with the backlash against this.
If is the suggestion then, because she said she had a feeling it was going to be canceled because everyone was hating on it before it even came out, and it's like, is that what it takes to cancel a thing? Like, are you saying Disney made this decision, or are you saying that those people convinced everyone else to not watch it?
I mean, I'm firmly of the belief that, like, if this had been some crazy rating success, but the audience scores were through the floor, and everyone, the general consensus, it was awful, but like loads of people watched it, Disney would 100% renewed it for season 2.
In this video, does she address the ratings at any point?
Well, let's find out.
No.
Not even seen it. And that's when we started experiencing a rampage of, I would say, hyper-conservative bigotry and vitriol, prejudiced hatred, and hateful language towards.
Why do I feel like she's got some buzzwords like sellotaped above her monitor or something, and she's just reading off them? Like, it honestly looks like she's like, okay, so what's the next thing? Bigotry, hatred, conservatives, MAGA, Trump. I don't know. I guess. Like,
who is she talking about? Like, I've watched a ton of anti-Acolyte content on YouTube, and I've never seen anyone argue against the show on the basis of sex or race. Literally not one video. So who the hell is she talking about?
Well, the thing is, when someone says lesbian space witches, they would say that's an example, and everyone's like, no, that's just that they are lesbian. They are lesbian.
Literally what they are.
In my world, that's a giant plus.
It can be a giant plus.
Well, I'd like to know how they reconcile the people who like are fairly progressive or left leaning or whatever, or even people in the LGBT community who still thought this show was dog shit. Like, what's their explanation for them?
I wrote a movie pitch with lesbian space witches in it before the Acolyte came out, and I thought
I want your show to get like made,
let's do that.
I listened to your version and it sounded amazing.
I have to say though, I wanted to say that an idea of delving into the Sith lore is a really good idea.
Sure.
I'd
like to know where they. Yeah, I'd like to know.
I've often wondered, like, what is it the Sith want? What is their like? Okay, why taking over the galaxy is a pain in the ass. What is your end game? Once you do it, once you get it, once the Phantom Menace, Palpatine succeeded, and then what? I mean, I thought that the Acolyte was gonna delve into something that we haven't seen before, which is expanding the lore of the Sith. And instead, when we first saw the first trailers come out, I'm like, this looks like a Saturday morning Sid Marty Krofft show from the 1970s. Maybe that's a little hyperbolic, but it had that cheap, we're using the volume again look. And it didn't look, it takes place in the High Republic. The first episode didn't transport us to a different time or a different place. It felt like every other Star Wars thing I'd ever seen. It was no different than anything else. It felt like a mid-level Tales of the Jedi comic from Dark Horse in the 90s. And there was nothing particularly special about it. And they certainly didn't show us anything particularly special. And I think that it was disappointing for everybody on pretty much every level. Take away the gender, take away the sex or the ethnicity of characters, but as a show that was going to delve into the Sith, which is how it was sold to me as the Acolyte, I think it failed.
It was another aspect of that as well, which I quite liked, because I went back through to do a supercut of all the videos I did, and actually at the beginning of it went out of my way to say, well, this is a part of the premise that I find genuinely interesting. And yes, the Sith backstory was one part of that. The other part of that, though, was the fact that Leslie Headland had been quite open in saying that she's taking a lot of inspiration from her own family life, from the difficult relationship she has with her sister. And I was thinking, well, I can see how this could be good, because that's a very strong personal hook, which loads of Star Wars has been missing. If you look at Ahsoka, which is so sterile on a character level, it goes out of its way to friend zone the only two people who might conceivably have had a love interest. So there's nothing really to invest in. If there's a Star Wars show which A, is exploring the history of the Sith, and B, telling me a rooted family story, that's quite a lot of promise for a show. I want to see what it does with that. And then, of course, I just went on for 14 hours of untrammeled hate and bigotry. So, you know.
You know what this reminds me of? You remember the movie Bros that came out a couple of years ago?
Oh, no.
It bombed.
Why did you say that name?
It bombed, and then the guy, the executive and the writer, Billy Eichner, he came out and he blamed straight people on all the hatred for his shit movie failing. And I watched the featurette of Bros for a video that I made on it, and it's really fascinating because in the featurette, he's surrounded literally by members of the West Coast LGBTQ plus community. And they're all saying things like, this movie's amazing. This is a historical film. It's going to be incredible. And he really believed the movie was going to be a big hit because he'd been convinced by all these idiots that he'd surrounded himself with. And I think that's probably what's going on the Acolyte side. I think that the likes of Amanda Steinberg and so forth, they've surrounded themselves with like-minded morons. And they really believed that this was going to be a big hit. And they are shocked at what an absolute failure it's been. And I think even look at her face, like you can still see it. Like there's just this disbelief that this thing that they thought was incredible, nobody watched it, nobody liked it, and it was a massive failure.
What you said earlier, it feels like a smokescreen. Is she actually saying that angry hyper righties were so mean about it online, it convinced the general populace not to watch it? Are you insane? That's not how that works. Everyone knows that's not how that works.
What I do want to do, like, I want to just play the last few seconds of the clip just before we give our thoughts on it, because, like, yeah, I think the terrain that she gets into is kind of interesting, but I'll let her say it herself.
It does. And, you know, this really affected me when I first got the job, because it's just not something, even though I anticipated it happening, it's not something you can fully understand what it feels like.
Oh, shit. Sorry, it's froze out there. Yeah, the final bit was like, it's not something you can fully understand until you're part of it, I suppose. But it's, I feel like it's frozen at the most inopportune moment. I mean, I'm not trying to say that she was on any substances when she was recording this, but she did seem a bit unusually chill when she was doing it. But I guess the point being, you know, if your premise is that a small cabal of like ultra right-wing conservative people somehow influenced everyone else to not watch this show, you're either suggesting that those people have a crazy amount of influence over the general public, which is inexplicable, really, in terms of what one small group of people can do when they don't have any sort of framework to base that on, or two, that maybe the audience that you thought was going to be there to support your show isn't as big as you'd hoped it was, which I think is probably the more understandable explanation for this. It doesn't ultimately come down to some crazy conspiracy to undo the success of your show or to turn people against you. Maybe it just wasn't very good in the first place, and not enough people were interested in it to watch it.
Drinker, Andor season 1 has a non-white protagonist and a lesbian relationship in it. How come that didn't get scuttled away? What happened there?
It's almost like people value good writing and good characters and good storytelling above
those alt-writers. They weren't loud enough
on
that one. They had to shout louder. They had to get everyone. Because I'd love to ask you some follow-up questions on this, because she's clearly blaming that as the reason for it to get cancelled, as opposed to, like I said, any kind of addressing of any of the hard numbers, any of the interest, all those people that we were talking about this, I think, on the last episode, but all those people who've been making tweets and signing things lately, being like, Acolyte, got to get it back. It's starting to wonder if even 50% of those people even watched it. If they're just doing this for the fight of it, they don't actually give a shit at all about the Acolyte, because you almost want a season 2 to happen and then to get the actual numbers to know exactly how many people are actually supporting this show, because this is the only project, to my knowledge, that Disney have publicly made clear they will not be continuing for Star Wars.
Well,
You know, we've
just
got
to
shit like
be-
Rian Johnson's trilogy still hasn't been officially cancelled yet, from all the way back
Bear
in
in
fucking
mind,
2018.
It's still going to happen, MauLer. It's still going to happen.
The cancellation
believe
was
that?
leaked. Just bear in mind, like Disney did not announce that that was leaked from someone inside Disney because they wanted to humiliate Lucasfilm and Leslie Headland.
But it's been owned, right? Surely, because otherwise
It's been
couldn't they
owned.
just-
Like they haven't denied it. It's been owned, but Disney didn't want this to be announced publicly. It was leaked.
That's hilarious.
The thing I
Yeah.
think that a lot of people don't, it's hard to convince or make people understand this, but when you're working on something, when you're making a film or a TV show, when you're working on it, everyone's trying their best and everyone believes what they're doing is going to be great. They really are. No one in this day and age, there's too much money being spent on these shows. No one's thinking, oh, this sucks. Nobody takes a job on a low budget B movie and walks around talking about how terrible it is. This show had all the money in the world. It had the backing of Disney and Lucasfilm. There was no reason to believe, although there is a reason to believe now, because it just seems like we've been getting so much Star Wars content for the last 9 years that is misguided. But I can understand how everybody might have hoped it would have been great. But what I just don't understand in the production of this show is, what were they trying to add to the Star Wars mythos that harked back to the original trilogy where Star Wars really begins? And in terms of the Sith was an idea that permeated the first 3 films, the original movies, and they've been woefully underexplored in terms of what they wanted. And yet this show, it was teed up more. People were going to love it. If it was a great Sith-based show, you show us a Sith Lord like Darth Maul, people love it, even though he didn't say anything in Phantom Menace. Barely said anything. This show could have been great. There were people, they were not lining up. I think more people wanted this show to be good. We were talking about it on various shows I've been on that we hoped it was good. I didn't hear any real hatred and vitriol before it started. People were like, well, wait, what is this? And to watch what we were given, it's one of the most crushingly disappointing TV shows I might have ever watched, because I did have hope for it. And what they gave to me was not, it didn't make a whole lot, just like Rings of Power. As a matter of fact, this feels a lot like Rings of Power. To watch The Acolyte is not unlike watching Rings of Power.
I might I agree with the general sentiment of what you're saying there. I might dispute the comparison with Rings of Power, because with Rings of Power, I get the impression that is a show made to order. It's made because they wanted to make a Lord of the Rings property, and the people who are making it are trying to invest it with some kind of meaning that they don't have the investment or the creative ability to actually summon up. With The Acolyte, I think it's got the opposite problem, where I think Leslie Headland, for her, this show was a $180 million therapy session for her and her strained relationship with her sister. And it kind of ties into the point that Platoon made there earlier, where you said that you find that quite to be a promising aspect of the show, where it's like the writer has a personal connection to the subject matter, and they're going to try and bring that forward into the show. I guess that's a nice idea in theory, but if the writer in question has no real storytelling ability, and it is literally just, I'm going to project all of my insecurities and all of my emotional hang-ups and all of my ridiculous emotional bullshit into this show, and Star Wars is just like a convenient platform for me to do that, you're going to end up with garbage. I could predict that. Anyone on this panel could predict that. We did predict it, and that's exactly what we got. And we're getting pilloried for it now because we predicted something that exactly happened.
Well, Leslie Headland made Russian Doll. That was a good show. I like that show. I guess that's why I was a little bit more.
And that's fair enough. But like Phoebe Waller-Bridge made Fleabag, which was good. But then like everything else that they've tried to put her into in Hollywood has been fucking garbage.
That Ridley Scott guy, did you hear? He's the one that made Alien. Isn't that crazy?
Apparently,
he also made Prometheus.
He did this movie called Blade Runner as well.
Yeah, it's true. It happens. I get what you're saying, because like the there's always potential. There's always like a chance that you think maybe, because to your point, I thought was quite interesting on the note of like a lot of the people that participate in the production, they often can't, especially like on the job actors that are going from one thing to one thing to one thing. I think it was either Benedict Cumberbatch or someone else on the topic of Infinity War and Endgame. They were filming scenes they didn't even know would be in the film, and they didn't know when they happened in the film. They weren't being told shit all. They were just like, in this one, you need to say this, and you're thinking this. It's like, okay, who? And then you know, they go to see it when it releases. Maybe they're like, there you go. And apparently, it's one of the most money making films in history. I guess it was great, excellent. So you may as well have the attitude when filming of, this is going to be a good one. I'm sure of it, even if it looks cringe, sounds cringe, smells cringe, all of the cringe. But you sort of go with it and hope for the best. But I saw someone point out Carrie-Anne Moss like disappeared from the marketing soon after the first few episodes came out. I don't even know that I think she came on to do the job and she's already moving on to whatever's next, which I can't blame her for. But Amandla, of course, this was very personal for her. So it makes sense that she's put this video out basically being like, you know who it was? It was the haters' fault. Which I would have told her if I was a friend, don't tell them that. Don't say it was the haters that is why your show has died. That gives them so much power that, like I said, I'm more than willing to admit if the 5 of us made 1,000 videos about how it's the worst show ever, that still really wouldn't move the needle on whether or not Disney are going to renew it. It's down to the engagement.
And the thing is, I've always said as well, like, we don't fucking make the news, we just report on it. And if a show's garbage, like we can sort of point out, like, yeah, like it's wrong for X, Y, and Z, and like we can all have a laugh at it. It doesn't change the viewing figures, though. We don't have that degree of power, and it's absurd to put that kind of like impetus on us. We do not have that ability.
Well, fuck it, fine. Like, if you want us to, I don't mind us being the tastemakers compared to maybe Amanda Stenberg. I don't think we can trust her artistic taste if she's going to tell us the Acolyte is the best shit to happen to Star Wars forever.
We need another diss track. I think that would sort of things out pretty quick.
I will happily claim the credit for killing the Acolyte, but I don't think I deserve it. But if you want to give it to me, I'll take it. But it's just classic conspiracist thinking. It's a way of avoiding the actual truth. There was a tweet I saw doing the rounds like last week, I think it was, of somebody saying that the worst thing is which section of the fan base Disney listened to when it made this decision. It's like, no, like, if Disney was listening to this section of the fan base, we would not have fucking 3 seasons of The Mandalorian. Like, that's not what we'd get. We wouldn't have Ahsoka being renewed. We wouldn't have a Rey movie coming down the line. We probably wouldn't have the Mando movie either. If they were listening to people who were criticizing the Acolyte on the basis of its appalling literary quality, it would be much better off. But that's evidently not what's happened. Hence the fact they keep churning out yet more shit.
I'm infinitely amused by them being like, all right, they have the meeting for renewing the Acolyte, and they're like, can you pop that Critical Drinker guy's YouTube on? I just want to see what he thought of it. He didn't like it? Fuck, we probably shouldn't renew this.
Kill it.
Well, I'll never understand.
Actors in these shows can avoid so much criticism just by shutting the fuck up. If they there's not many people out there. Like, I'm sure there's a few weirdos, but like generally the plurality of fans or angry fans, if an actor just doesn't have anything to say about the show that they were in, or if they're just really like generic and say, hey, I was just excited to be part of this, I hope you like it. If not, no hard feelings. Pretty hard to be annoyed at an actor like that. But if you get someone like Amandla who decides to make diss tracks, like raging against all the right-wing bigots and projecting all their insecurities and all their political hang-ups onto an imaginary boogeyman, that's how you turn people against you. Like, why do it?
I was watching a video that showed Halle Bailey's Razzie speech yesterday, and it's really charming. She made this fucking terrible movie, Catwoman, and then she won the Razzie for worst actress.
Halle Berry.
Halle Berry. Sorry, Halle Berry, and she won the Razzie, and she went and she made this funny acceptance speech, and it was very charming. And you compare that to this wee bitch, Amanda Stenberg, who made a diss track basically suggesting that white people don't care about the existence of blacks or some vague racist insinuation. And then she goes off and she basically talks about all the haters and the vitriol. Like, she's a thoroughly unpleasant person. And the point I'm making is, just because the project failed doesn't mean you can't use it as an opportunity to build your fan base and to ingratiate yourself to the general audience, like Halle Berry did off the back of Batwoman, like Sydney Sweeney did off the back of Madam
Web.
Madam Web.
Correct me if I'm wrong, just quick.
She's just making everybody hate her. Like, whose advice are you following, you moron?
You've
got a career ahead of you. You're very young. Actually, if you're be nice to people and you present yourself well in public, there will be benefits to that long term. But if you're just going to be a spiteful wee rat-arsed bitch, no one's going to like you, and they're not going to want to see you in anything.
Didn't Halle Berry? That was that night was the night after she got the Oscar as well, or something.
Yes, for Monster.
She. I remember her treating it as if it was an Oscars win, like she was crying.
I remember
seeing the
video,
crying on stage, like, "Oh my god, this means so much to me."
It's such a good sport to do that. That's great.
Yeah.
What I there's something I don't understand about, again, Star Wars. I don't understand why people aren't. Lucas looks back at Kurosawa, The Hidden Fortress or Seven Samurai, to inspire him. Kurosawa looked to Shakespeare. When he made Ron, he was adapting King Lear as a samurai movie. And that was pretty interesting and unique. I don't understand why, when you're making Star Wars, these creators are not looking back to the very things that inspired the creation of Star Wars in the first place. Whether it was Samurai Tales or... You can't lose if you're going to go. If you're going to go,
but it's multi-generational now. So we're now like a couple of generations down the line. So now, instead of referencing the classic storytelling that inspired Star Wars, we're now referencing early Star Wars or.
But it's not even that. So, like, Dave Filoni, for example, very much does look back to the influences George Lucas had, because George Lucas told him which influences he should be looking at. And if you watch any Star Wars produced by Dave Filoni, it is so on the nose what he's stealing from. But the problem is, in a sense, the different one. The problem with Dave Filoni is that he's derivative, not innovative. The problem with something like Leslie Headland and The Acolyte is that she's not particularly interested in the original ideas of Star Wars, it doesn't seem to me, but she is interested in other things that she just vaguely thinks are cool, which is why you get overt Matrix scenes like transplanted into The Acolyte for no thematic or artistic reason whatsoever. That's derivative as well. The problem is derivation all the way around. There's very few people around who understand the innovation that went into creating this unique Star Wars aesthetic. They don't have the imagination and also the humility to say, actually, this is what somebody else did that was brilliant. And it would be wrong of me just to steal it. I have to try and do something new with it to earn my use of that inspiration.
But these classical forms have existed for a long period of time, and they're constantly reinvented. But you have to know the classical forms in the first place.
Yeah, well, so
I don't imagine someone like Leslie Headland would have that knowledge.
On the note of the Matrix, right, as a potential inspiration / something she'll homage, I actually believe that, no offense to any particular person involved in the project of The Acolyte, they would likely cite that as like, wow, look at this old reference we've got in here.
And it's from over 20 years ago, man.
And then that's the thing. It's like, oh yeah, look at the influences that ended up helping create the OT. They're probably going to look at you and be like, oh, you want me to rewatch the OT before? And you're like, no. Okay. Just, you're not even going to entertain doing that. I should have thought better than to think you'd go back further than the 2000s. Like, that's how I imagine a lot of this goes. They're all caught up in like trying to stay up to date, and they'll be like, why would I watch Kurosawa? I don't know who that. Why would I do that? And it's like, oh.
I always get the impression as well there's a degree of resentment towards like the OT, because like they probably feel like it's afforded so much leeway and so much praise that in their minds it doesn't deserve.
They see it as a ball and chain at this point.
Probably, yeah, and they're probably thinking, "Oh God, why do we have to be handcuffed to this ridiculous, like, overarching storyline bullshit when we can just play fast and loose and tell our own story? Why should we not be able to do that?" That's the impression I get.
There's even more hostility in it, I think. I mean, you don't look at something like The Acolyte and say that it's merely bored by the OT. You look at The Acolyte and think it's very much deliberately and consciously trying to subvert the OT in terms of like the basic moral message, even the basic artistic structure of the thing. It's not just something that it's interested in. It's something that it thinks it has to actively work against if it's to stand out in its own way. And you see this kind of all over the place. The Rings of Power does it to an extent with the humanizing of the orcs, people who are very uncomfortable with notions of like binary but objective good versus evil. That's very much present in The Acolyte. I think it's more a case of there is the current milieu and the current like atmosphere in which most current Hollywood writers and creators come up in is one which very much says, no, you have to deconstruct all old-fashioned systems of binary virtue. Everything like that has to be torn down to find an interesting story. You can't simply tell us an old-fashioned morality tale. and stand out because that's been done. And you want to be new, don't you? You want to be innovative. You want to stand out from the crowd. So by all means, have Luke Skywalker abandon the Jedi. By all means, have the triumphant moment of a young female aspirant Sith choking an innocent Jedi to death and call that a moral victory. That's how you're going to make your mark in the world, because that's the way Hollywood currently works.
The ironic thing is that they'll regard themselves as innovative for doing that, but that kind of revisionist approach to IPs, whereby we're going to revise this IP and we're going to change the morality of it and we're going to make the hero the villain and make the villain sympathetic and so forth. It's kind of like revisionist history. They're distorting it to fit their own political agenda. That's been going on since at least 2015 when they did the Terminator Genesis. And that was very much distorted and subverted.
God,
so it's 10 going on a fucking decade now. We've had nothing but this shite, and they still, for some reason, think that this is it. This is not innovative. This is hackneyed. It's played out. It's tried. Stop this. Do something fresh. Do something the audiences want to see.
To quote The Crow, like, the idea has become the institution, and like when you get to that point, like, it's no longer innovative. You're not fresh. You're not new. You're not original. And the thing that you were trying to push in the first place wasn't a particularly good idea anyway. It's all born from this idea that storytelling in generations past, I suppose, was just stale. It was hackneyed. It was boring. It was predictable. And like, the people that did it had no imagination. And when you actually look at it and you actually take the time to deconstruct what they did and how it all fits together, like the actual thought that went into it, you realize they had way more grasp of storytelling. They had a better conceptual idea of what people want and what goes into like an emotionally satisfying story than we're ever going to have now. But they can't accept that idea because that would mean acknowledging that, hey, maybe this classic idea of storytelling actually works, and maybe the thing that we're trying to supplant it with is kind of shit, and nobody's really buying into it anymore.
And the audience they think exists doesn't.
No. Well, the Acolyte's proof of that. The modern audience, this mythical modern audience that Star Wars has been chasing for the past 10 years, doesn't exist. Doesn't buy your product, never going to support the crap that you're doing. Doesn't matter how hard you push it. Doesn't matter how many hundreds of millions of dollars you sink into it. They ain't there, and they're never going to be there.
Actually, they were right there, clamoring for it, but the big, loud, mean bigots were so loud they couldn't hear it, and they couldn't get to it. The voices were too loud. So, I guess hopefully next time there's less bigoty voices.
I wish there was someone who was vaguely connected with Hollywood who could see this and just understand the modern audience doesn't exist. This thing that you've been preaching to for a decade or more doesn't exist. You're wasting your time. You're wasting franchises. You're wasting so many priceless opportunities that will never come again. And you are destroying your own business model in the process. Please stop, for the love of God.
Some of them understood that it doesn't exist, but they tried to socially engineer it into existence. I think a lot of the thinking in Hollywood over the past decade has been, if we just change entertainment to the way we want the world to be, we can make people think like we think, essentially to just propagandize entertainment and socially engineer the modern audience into existence.
You mean the BBC approach then?
Yeah, essentially, the BBC, England was always diverse kind of thing. We were always at war with Eurasia, that kind of approach. And no, it doesn't work. You cannot fundamentally change human psychology. Men will always like gorgeous women, big tits, awesome action, guns, explosions, and Arnold Schwarzenegger making one-liners. We're always going to love that.
I thought you were going to say awesome. For some reason, I thought you were going to say awesome tits there.
Awesome tits.
That's already been covered.
Not even large breasts, right? Just awesome breasts. Yeah. They can be large, they can be small, just as long as they're awesome. Yeah.
Quality over quantity.
Quality is what we're after. We don't.
No, I get the point you're making though. Is that I guess the fundamental things that we look for in our entertainment, whether it's going to be the hero's journey, whether it's going to be just titillation and sexuality and like the basic drives that we find appealing, they haven't changed, and they're probably not going to change ever. And it doesn't matter how many different ways you try to re-engineer that. The human condition wants what it wants, and if you don't provide it to them, eventually they're going to realize that you're not giving them what they're looking for, and they're going to look elsewhere.
Exactly.
You know, it's
I mean,
and
you saw that with Barbie. Women, Hollywood was not making movies for women; they just weren't. And then Barbie came along, that was for women, and they show up in massive numbers.
Yeah, and like, well, there you go. You know, probably men weren't super hot on it, but you know, we give us what we want. You know, I'm fine with that. If you want to produce more movies like Barbie that are kind of targeted toward the female audience, great, go for it. But give guys the flip side of that little coin right there, and then we'll all be happy.
Like, you see the little droplet, you know, like John Wick and Extraction and Nobody, just films like that. They drop out every once in a while and they do well, and it's like
they do, but they're small budget and they don't get the backing that they really deserve. Like, you know, you're not going to get something on the level of Barbie, which was like the box office phenomenon of last year. We haven't had that. We haven't been able to that
for an action movie.
Well, it doesn't have to be action; it could be anything.
I mean,
it's probably going to be action oriented, I suppose, if it's targeted toward a male audience.
We got like Maverick was quite a surprise, run away with the money, right?
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, does that fill the box?
I mean, I suppose it does.
Like,
yeah, so like that was
the male version of Barbie, but we just give us more of that kind of thing.
Give us Maverick and also tits. And
here's a great example.
Perfect, you know.
Nobody wanted not Mad Max, a Furiosa saga, starring Anya Taylor-Joy as not Mad Max and not starring Mel Gibson as at all.
Meanwhile, everybody wanted Hugh Jackman Wolverine and Ryan Reynolds Deadpool killing shit together. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Give the audience what they want. Like, give them the Mel Gibson Mad Max movie. Give them, you know, Deadpool and Wolverine just going mad, having fun in a admittedly junky movie, but hey, it's fun.
And the sad thing is, like, Furiosa isn't a terrible movie.
It's a 7 out of 10.
Perfectly good movie in its own right, but it's not hitting the spot in terms of what your audience wants. Like as you said there, if you were to do Mad Max 4 with Mel Gibson as old Mad Max, I think you would have done crazy numbers at the box office. Like, the nostalgia factor would have kicked in big time. Dude, it would have been fan service of the highest order, but it doesn't matter. You're making money.
We're in an era that's ready to go on old man X movies. We got all kinds of shit ready to go for
old
that.
Old man Blade, fine.
I mean, old man Wolverine, as they baited the cameo section, right? Like that's what they could do at any point that people would go see it.
But you know what? What I'm also missing though is the audience for. There's a lot of really innovative. There's a movie out now called Strange Darling. I would encourage everyone to go see. A low budget film, but and it's not a big studio movie, but it's a great little indie movie that if I would have seen it, you know, in 1984, it would have been now a stone cold genre classic. But people don't know that they're out there, and I'd love to see more people. You know, when I was growing up, I had a healthy diet of both B movies the Terminator. When the Terminator came out, no one really knew much about it. James Cameron was coming off of working on things like Galaxy of Terror and Escape from New York, and he'd done Piranha 2: The Spawning. And when you go to see,
he also did Battle Beyond the Stars.
Yeah, he worked on that, the effects of that, and but going to see the Terminator in the theater, not, you know, to me it was like RoboCop. It had a title that wasn't exactly highbrow, and you sat in that theater, and it was really a revelation. You know, that Terminator is 40 years old, and the Netflix anime series just dropped, so which I hear is quite good.
What did you think when you saw Genesis for the first time and you saw them go back into the Terminator and fuck with the whole story and then decanonize Terminator 2?
It's baffling to me. And it's like, I understand, like, you know, we talked about Salvation. At least Salvation tried to do something. It's
on its own
on its own merits. Where you will look at Genesis and they're just like replaying. Again, it was like Alien Romulus, just this greatest hits thing over and over again. And
yeah, well, up until Salvation, they sort of maintained the timeline where it's like Terminator 3 kind of implied, like, okay, Judgment Day still happened, you just postponed it. Like, okay, it's bullshit, but like, fine, okay. So Judgment Day still happens eventually, and then you get into the future war against Skynet with Salvation, which again maintains the integrity of the timeline to a degree.
somewhat.
And then then you get to Genesis and then Dark Fate, which just say fuck it, everything that came before X, Y, and Z is just irrelevant now.
And then Dark Fate decanonized everything again. But I was just going to say quick on Salvation, the Terminator is incredibly dear to me. What they did to it was horrible. The Salvation's choice to be like, we're going to have a future war movie. It's like, oh, that's amazing. And they don't even slightly use the style or atmosphere from the future scenes of Terminator 1 and 2.
No.
Not even close. It's like, what the fuck were you thinking? That was all the fans were blown away by those scenes, and you didn't pick them up at all.
I mean, they were super intense, so to have an entire movie based around that would be quite hardcore.
I'm not talking about like your constant explosions or anything, which, by the way, they had a lot of in Salvation. I'm talking about the way it was shot,
the look,
the style. They had nothing. Not even like I didn't even feel the scrappy sort of on the edge of existence nature of the rebelling forces, right? Like the humanity down to its last. Because you get the story of trying to set up Kyle Reese in Salvation as well. I'll at least say the casting. I forget his name. The actor who died, who was Chekhov in the reboot.
Oh, Anton Yelchin.
That's it, yeah. Far better casting for Kyle Reese than what's his name? Jai Courtney, yeah. God, that
Kai Jortney.
His casting as Kyle Reese and Emilia Clarke as Sarah Connor killed me when I was watching.
Horrendous. Some of the worst casting in a Hollywood movie.
Yeah.
I just shared this because I wanted to get your thoughts on which of these movies do you think an audience actually really wants to see? Because I know you, Drinker, you made a video saying that Hollywood are turning the corner and they're getting away from the message and beginning to try to appeal more to a broader audience. And out of this, what do you think general audiences will show up for and actually want to see, as opposed to
Avatar.
what Hollywood wants them to see?
I want them to see Nobody 2. I want people to see that because Nobody was quite a good movie. Blade, I want the Wesley Snipes version of that. I want Old Man Blade.
Five Nights at Freddy's 2, yes.
What?
Megan 2.0.
Freddy's. Threegan 2.
Mithregan
2. You know what? We should disqualify the ones we know will be successful. Which I can't believe him say this, but that's not Mission Impossible 8. That ain't gonna make its money, is it?
I think it might. I think if they can distance themselves from Dead Reckoning.
It ran into Barbenheimer. And also Sound of Freedom, it got a little bit unlucky with the release drop, but I don't know. I
still don't fully know.
I feel like a hindsight argument. Nobody ever would have thought that Mission Impossible was going to be killed by Barbenheimer. I just don't.
It lost its IMAX screens to Oppenheimer, which was a massive financial blow.
Well, we'll see this time around. I think they need to market it as the final Mission Impossible. This is huge. You have to come see this. This is Tom Cruise's, baby that's been lasting for generations. You got it. If they do that, they might be able to do it.
Is it the final Mission Impossible?
Yes. I mean, if it made $2 billion, they'd probably make another one.
Yes.
You look at this release schedule, and it's fine. But the real question is anything here going to be a zeitgeist movie that people are just excited to see? Or are they just going because it's something? That's the thing, that what we're missing here. I really want to see F1 because seeing F1, seeing Joe Kosinski shoot F1 car racing the way he shot Top Gun Maverick, I'll watch that simply because I can't wait to see that. I don't know if anybody
is that the Brad Pitt one?
Yeah.
So we've got Brad Pitt, a 60-year-old F1 driver.
A 60-year-old
F1.
I know, right? But the driving scenes will be just like Tom Cruise, a 60-year-old fighter pilot. But it's I look at all this stuff and I'm thinking, why? If you look at this, what in any of this is exciting from an innovative? It's all stuff that we've been seeing. So, I read an article, a really interesting article. I think I now will do my show on it tonight. That there used to be a discovery part of going to the movies, where you would see something that you didn't know what it was going to be. It kind of came out of nowhere. You'd heard it was good. You go see it, and it was nothing like anything you'd seen before. That was true of the Terminator. My friends and I went and saw it, and it was like we're in high school, maybe this movie will be good. And from the first 10 seconds of when that movie starts, you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? and you're locked in because the themes. The Matrix was like that too. I went with a jaded bunch of industry people to the Warner Brothers lot. People thought, was this Johnny Mnemonic 2? What was this? Nobody really knew anything about it. And I'll never forget sitting in that theater, and when Keanu Reeves is revealed to be a human battery after being red pilled, I was like, I was blown away. And that was what, 45 minutes into the movie?
That felt shared too culturally, you know, like
100%. And that's what, and the same was true of Barbenheimer. That was a cultural shared zeitgeist event. Both Oppenheimer and Barbie were original movies, even though Barbie might have been based on an IP, but what was going on there was interesting and unique. And that's what cinema is completely missing. And if people don't understand that movies, the new movies, can give them that jolt and give them that feeling of sense of discovery, cinema itself is going to go away, because people are getting much more of that jolt from serialized streaming shows, whatever their favorite show is, whether they like Better Call Saul or they like the House of the Dragon, or I mean, take your pick, whatever your favorite streaming show is. But we're getting much more of a sense of a jolt of uniqueness from those. Than you look at that list and it's like there's nothing to discover in any of those movies. It's just variations on a theme. And
the thing I would ask though is like,
IP.
Is anyone really talking about Barbie now or Oppenheimer?
I've actually seen some videos, these from like Barbie supporters at the time who are making videos saying, actually, Barbie was kind of shit. I've seen a few of those.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but like, yeah, this is the thing. Like, has it made like a real cultural impact, or was it just a thing that was like a flash in the pan? Like everyone was just excited to go see it because it was just the cool thing to do that summer.
Well, I mean, at least Barbie had an interesting take. I mean, you had two independent filmmakers, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, writing a script that a studio, I mean, for a studio movie, it had some interesting stuff going on. I mean, I don't think Barbie wasn't necessarily my thing, but it was unique.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, if you look at the influence of The Matrix, for example, suddenly you saw this big resurgence of like kung fu heavy movies, like where martial arts took priority, or, you know, bullet time started appearing in every film, or, you know, you started getting movies that dealt with themes of existentialism and, you know, what's the nature of reality. Like, it made a huge cultural impact on the way we saw movies and storytelling and our visual medium. I just wonder, like, has Barbie done anything like that?
No.
And I would probably argue no.
But I still think it got people excited about going to the movies. I mean, look, a movie like The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, that was a big hit. But it didn't have, you know, people loved it and it played out on cable, but I don't think anyone's clamoring for another Fugitive sequel.
Maybe it's a matter of frequency, like, because The Matrix is surrounded, especially in the early 2000s. We got some banger cultural movies coming out alongside it. Like, when you say Barbenheimer, it's like, all right, how far in either direction, both past and future, do we have to go to name the next one of those? It's like, oh,
yeah.
shit.
And also the rise of the internet. I mean, back then, that The Matrix was 1999, and that was the same year of Phantom Menace. And, you know, we were so excited for that trailer, we'd spend all night downloading that trailer just to watch it. And The Matrix was also on the cusp of a huge cultural revolution in terms of the internet, high-speed internet coming in, and it had something to say about our culture, even though it was a sci-fi movie, but it was about our culture, how our culture was changing at the time. And and this article that I think I'll read it. No one's making movies about today. Like, our culture is in a really weird, interesting, dangerous, exciting, depressing place.
I would argue that The Matrix Regurgitations is a movie about culture today, and that is why it's so terrible. It's as much a zeitgeist movie as the original Matrix, because just as the original Matrix really captures that late 90s zeitgeist, The Matrix Regurgitated captures that soulless, corporate, plagiaristic, empty, trash culture of the sort of late 2010s, early 2020s.
But in that sense, it succeeds only in sort of emulating every other film that also exemplifies that, even if it wasn't intended to display it.
I think it was. I think Matrix Regurgitations was intended.
True, but it doesn't stand out as a zeitgeist film solely because what it's trying to do is what every other thing around it already does. The Matrix is really interesting because it does come, as Robert says, at the time of the cusp of a brand new technology. It cribs a lot from Ghost in the Shell, so it's not entirely new material. I think they actually had to get permission to continue writing the film they did because certain scenes were so very similar. But both tackle this emergent new technology, which is not just a change in degree from what life had been like before, but it's a change in kind. There'd never really been anything like what was coming in the late 1990s. And like the potential for the thing was kind of being understood well before the technology itself caught up. We don't have anything quite like that at the moment. The closest thing to it is probably AI, but AI has already been done in Hollywood so very many different times in different ways, because conceptually it's the kind of thing you can grasp before the technology becomes around. The problem at the moment is we live in actually incredibly boring times, which is why everything like seems so polarized and dramatic, is the narcissism of small differences. There are no brand new things, no exploration, no real new discoveries being made that can actually shift the zeitgeist in film in terms of unlocking entirely new types of story to tell. So we are just stuck with Barbie, for instance, which never set out to be a zeitgeist film. Barbie is the Super Mario film for girls. All it was is, hey, everyone of your generation played with this as a kid, so here it is on the big screen, go see it. It's not going to try and do anything very new. Actually, Barbie did some kind of attempted to do interesting thematic things, but entirely failed to make them legible. But like its main appeal is just familiarity, and that's what everything is. It's all familiarity. The list that we had on the screen earlier, it's very hard to do the crossing the first threshold in the hero's journey if your film is Captain America 4. We've done it 4 times already. How many new journeys are you going on?
Illustrate that point, then in that image you had side by side fucking Insidious 6 and Scary Movie 6.
Jesus Christ. The Conjuring 4.
That there's so much to think about with that. Insidious 6, Scary Movie, the thing that parodies those very movies, is stuck on 6 as well. You're just like, Jesus Christ,
that's
guys.
Actually that's a perfect encapsulation. Like Scary Movie and just below it Insidious 6, because a movie with a 6 next to it would have been a joke in the 90s, right? It would have been treated as a joke, and now it's
Rocky
fucking
6.
real.
Well, look at 28 years later. I mean, I think I like both of the 28 days and 28 weeks later movies are good.
They missed 20 months, man.
When Marty travels into the future to 2015 in Back to the Future 2, he sees a cinema and it says something like Jaws 10. And that was a joke in the 80s, but now literally Saw 11 is coming out next year.
It was reserved solely, I think, for like the horror slasher movies that managed to climb all the way up there, but they usually had to be in space at that point. It's sort of
like Freddy versus Jason in space, traveling through time or something. Yeah.
The real question is cinema going to even exist in 20 years?
No.
Streaming's going to try and kill it.
You got that combination of streaming and the fact that people's fucking home cinema setups are so ridiculous now that like they basically rival cinema screens anyway. So like, what's the draw?
Well, and the paradigm, the 2-hour paradigm of telling these kinds of stories, if the studios aren't going to make anything. I mean, you think about it, all the movies that we love came out of studios. I mean, they're not all of them, but for the most part, these large franchise properties, the studios were the very best at giving us new things, because sequels didn't usually work. And all the movies, whether you're talking about Star Wars or Back to the Future or, pick your pick, Matrix, these movies that we all love were all original visions brought to us by a motion picture studio. And now we live in this corporatized world where everything is bigger and bigger, whether it's BlackRock and Vanguard owning 88% of the Dow Jones, the stock market. I mean, it's gotten to the point where our society itself, not just Hollywood, but the corporatized. I mean, I feel like we're living in the original Rollerball from 1975, where corporations owned everything, and they placated the masses with pomp and circumstance and bread and circusses.
I was about to say it's like Running Man, of which is getting remade as well.
Yeah. although I will defend that, because the story, Stephen King's book, there are 2 books Stephen King wrote as Richard Bachman that are in production right now. One is The Long Walk, which is an incredible, if you've read that, and the other is The Running Man. The Richard Dawson Running Man with Schwarzenegger has no resemblance to the book at all.
Yeah.
And so if they go back, and I know it's isn't it Edgar Wright who's doing
Edgar Wright, yeah, that's what interests me about it.
Yeah, and I think he's going to go back. The original book ends on a. I don't know how he can do the ending today after
It
what's
ends with a
happened in the world.
plane crash, which is bizarre.
Yeah,
I don't know.
a jetliner into a building.
Yeah, which is doesn't fit well with the aesthetic of the rest of the movie or contemporary
against
history,
the depressing tale that we're all very good at weaving. Though I mean, there is like a couple of rays of light, I suppose, which is that you can see across a number of different mediums, whether it's like manga or whether it's even streaming services from showing things from Korea, or whether it's the Wukong game, which is coming out of China at the moment. There are still infusions of new material. It's that we aren't really making it here. There's a qualitative difference in the sense that most of these things are actually very well made with a basic regard for the structure of storytelling, and they're not too navel-gazingly when it comes to their own political opinions and all the rest of that stuff. But they are all, some of them at least, are transposing myths from other cultures which we have not yet encountered into our culture for the first time, which makes it seem like a brand new and quite revitalizing thing.
Yeah.
So the more of that can happen, the better. And it would be nice if the Chinese actually started making more of their own good films as opposed to trying to replicate Hollywood for their own country, because then we might get new good stories. But there are still some coming through. It's just that we in the West are generally a little bit bored, I think, of ourselves. We don't look to the myths that we haven't yet adapted. We're not very interested in them. We don't really teach people about them either. That's also the reason for the decline in sort of the epic history film as well, because we're just not that interested. And I suspect the Gladiator 2 movie will not help to change that particular trajectory.
Well,
Is anyone?
It's a
are you
sad
guys
state of
interested in
affairs as well. Like when Western culture has to turn towards like the East, when it has to look for Korea, Japan, China, like to give us good stories now because we're not capable of creating them for ourselves.
I mean, unfortunately, this is a bit of a push and pull, but look at the box office. A lot of the most successful shit is franchise or sequel or comes from something that's at least commonly known. Like, even Barbie comes from a very iconic franchise. You know what I'm saying? Like the Deadpool and Wolverine, for example, doing as well as it did. It's like that's, in a way, some bad news in a sense of just like, oh, fuck, they're going to want to crank that now because they'll be like, well, this is what you guys want. And
yeah, I mean, I was really disappointed to see Alien Romulus do as well as it did because I want that fucking franchise to just die. There's so much really good space horror that you could do. There's so many novels you could adapt.
Oh yeah,
right. Like fucking Blake Crouch. He's a really good sci-fi writer. He has some really good ideas to do with time travel and things like that and alternate universes. Not in the dumb Marvel sense, but actually in an interesting, new, fresh, sort of modern sci-fi sense. There's so much good shit out there that you could adapt. And instead, you want to do the billionth Alien movie that is just a fucking
the craziest thing, right?
Shit we've seen before.
Alien 3 gets off to that awful fucking start, but that film has a style. It has some brilliant cinematography, amazing performances, some really interesting dynamics and characters, and then, of course, like religious themes getting injected that are actually, like, in terms of how they're handled, are very interesting, I think. Alien 4,
I totally agree.
Wacky, bizarre fucking thing, but it's brand new in a sense, right? Like the ingredients they're throwing in, what they're trying to get to work for us. It's just like, okay, I see you give it a try. Then you get to even a Prometheus. Feel like, wow, Ridley, this is some crazy shit. And to me, I don't know what it is exactly, but like seeing all of them try, even Paul W.S. Anderson, right, with AVP, it's very much a him movie. It's like it's the Alien and the Predator, the way it's edited, how cheesy and schlocky a lot of it is. You're like, oh, that's your take on this. Alien Romulus, it's like depressing to me. I was like, no, I don't want
the worst. I consider it the worst Alien movie because it is so derivative. And I would say, I would go as far as to say plagiaristic. It outright plagiarizes beat for beat aspects of Alien. It tries to get bits of Aliens in there, doesn't do it very well, and it just copies Alien for the most part. It's actually quite disgusting. And for that reason, I would rate it as the worst.
It takes little bits of every
it really
movie
does.
in the series and tries to like put it together into a great
fucking ripped off Resurrection. I can't fucking believe it. I couldn't believe it. You took one of the most iconically stupid scenes in one of the worst Alien movies. You copied it.
By the way, is the narrative still that this was mid? Because I've seen this narrative come out. Oh, it's not that bad. It's mid. It's like, are you out of your fucking mind? This isn't mid. This is terrible.
Well,
because a lot of people think it's mid.
I was under the impression everyone loved it. I thought we had like quite a minority perspective on this one.
I do. I like this question here. Like, I just think this cuts to the core of the whole question. Like, are we over entertained as a culture? Like,
I
is
don't
there
know,
just
man.
too much?
No,
Do we
I
have
feel like
too many
everyone's
options?
ready. Everyone's ready to bite the fuck into something amazing. I feel like we are. We can handle it.
we're saturated in incredibly shallow entertainment. I said this when Avatar 2 came out, and I could probably, I'm pretty sure, in fact, I can reuse the introduction for my Avatar 2 video for the Avatar 3 film when that comes out. But basically comparing that film to the Feelies from Brave New World, which is entirely divorced of content. It's just pretty colors. It's the most superficial kind of entertainment. It is entertaining after a fashion, but it doesn't really do anything. Like it's so surface level. It's just designed to titillate the senses and basically nothing else. It's not really designed to tell a convincing story. That's the kind of film that we are surrounded by. Alien Romulus is an example of that. I'd say Deadpool and Wolverine is an example of that as well. It's just designed to look at what your most easily tweaked little emotional responses are, and that tends to be things like nostalgia and fond memories, and just stick those on the screen. And people will sit there and they'll be entertained, and I can understand why people find that stuff entertaining. But by the same token, you are not going to be talking about Alien Romulus in a month's time, maybe even not 2 weeks' time from this point. Because all it does is remind you of when those films were good. All its best moments were good moments in other films. It doesn't have anything to offer for itself. And if you actually do go and sit down for a film wanting it to tell you a good new story, then you're going to find that film quite offensive. But the fact that the film is done well suggests that a lot of people are not overly concerned about that.
Yeah, it's prol feed. It's what Orwell called prol feed. It's manufactured garbage entertainment for the masses.
Well, I guess that's my question is, like, if you broaden that out into a wider context, like, okay, this movie, like, hit some of the familiar beats that people remember from a better era of filmmaking with the first Alien movie, all that sort of stuff. Okay, great. But is it, like, the fact that they're going to forget about it so quickly just a result of the fact that there's so many other things that are going to be competing for their attention, whether it's the next movie that comes out, the next TV show on the, like, 20 different streaming services that we have, the latest TikTok video, the latest like YouTube video talking about all these different movies that are coming out. Like, the point being, like, is there just too much stuff going on now for anyone to process or for anyone to really care about or get invested in for any like long lasting impact now? Is there just too much going on?
Well, I mean, I told you earlier I was studying the 3D cinema era, and I'm working on a video about Dread. And in 2012, so I was studying 2012 because I wanted to get the context and what kind of other movies were going on at that time. And 2012 was a fucking dreadful year for movies. It was awful. The amount of shite, like the Total Recall remake was in there. One of the Hunger Games movies was in there. Twilight. Some piece of shit Dwayne Johnson, The Rock movie was in there.
2012,
John Carter.
yes.
Yay!
Just awful, awful stuff. But people, Dread is still there. Like, Dread made it out, right? That's growing in reputation. That's a great movie, and people will still be watching that years from now. You know what I mean? And it will continue to grow in reputation and popularity. Everything around it was total dog shit, but eventually, over time, it came out and it got through all that, and
it has great 3D too.
Yeah, the miasma of sort of cultural putrescence around it dissipates, and over time we do see the gems underneath all that shit.
The only other thing I was going to ask you guys about was when we're talking about the subject of remakes and like just rehashing old ideas. The Crow came out a week ago, and it has done a grand total of $10,200,000 at the box office against a budget of at least $50 million that they'll admit to, probably more. So safe to say it's going to be a monumental flop, and rightly so, because it's a shit movie. I had to suffer through it. I fucking hated every minute of it. And I didn't really get the point of doing it. Like, was there really such a huge outcry for another Crow movie? Is it that big of a franchise? Don't really think so. I didn't even know, because I was vaguely aware, like, they did the movie from 1994 with Brandon Lee. It was a good cult classic movie in its day. They had 3 subsequent movies that were all direct to video with people like Edward Furlong in it and stuff, like just rehashing the Crow idea. All absolute garbage. No one cared about them. And then boom, 30 years later, they decided to do this one.
Don't forget the TV series, Stairway to Heaven.
Oh my God,
The Crow Stairway to Heaven. And look, again, it's they have an IP. They're going to milk this IP, and this was a case of no one really stopped and thought, well, we've never had it. It's never. The Crow's interesting. The first movie I think is legitimately a great film, but the subsequent features are an IP that never worked, that they keep recycling. And they decided, based on an IP that has already failed over and over again, that you're going to go spend $50 million on a new Crow movie?
It doesn't make sense.
Dude, there are so many that are in that position. They've done this to Terminator and Ghostbusters and shit.
Yeah.
Like these are bigger franchises by far than The Crow, but they're suffering just as much through this weird expectation that they're just like, you know what, this is just gonna make $500 million, I'm sure of it. Let's spend $100 million on it. He's like, what are you doing?
I think they knew with this one that it wasn't going to do well because they spent like apparently a minuscule, like I think it was like 10 million or something on the marketing for it, like the minimum contractual amount. So they knew it was going to be shit. But yeah, like I guess it's like written into their agreement, like they have to spend a certain amount on marketing no matter what. But like I do like the fact that the director from the original Crow movie actually chipped in to give his thoughts on about it. So it was like his name's Alex Proyas. He directed the Crow back in 1994, and so he started retweeting things about the initial reviews that came about this. He was saying like, "Wow, the reviews are brutal. I thought the remake was a cynical cash grab. Not much cash to grab, it seems."
Yeah, I mean, he's made some other great movies like Dark City. You know,
that was a great one. Yeah,
he made that after The Crow. He made a movie with Nicolas Cage that I actually quite like called Knowing.
I remember Knowing. Yeah.
I wouldn't say I liked it. It was a movie for sure.
It was a movie.
I liked it,
but yeah, Dark City. I've got a lot of enjoyment of, and I can see the connective tissue between that and The Crow. Like aesthetically, they look very similar.
Oh God, he made Gods of Egypt.
Yes, he did.
Oh.
Which is the Dark City prequel.
I can see why we don't hear about him too much nowadays.
That is a fascinating.
He made a great movie about rock bands in Australia back before he made The Crow. That's worth seeing.
Well, I think it's interesting as well because with The Crow, he'd actually lobbied for years to prevent them doing a remake of it. He didn't want to see it happen. And he tried everything in his power to dissuade them from doing it. And they went ahead and did it. Mm-hmm. And so I imagine there was a fair amount of schadenfreude on his part when the movie absolutely flopped.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is I don't think the movie, again, it misunderstood the audience for the first film. And I think the first film in a sense is in a sense a gothic fairy tale. And it has,
absolutely.
You know, it had music of the day. That movie has 2 soundtracks. It's got the source cues, the music with like The Cure and all these great 90s bands. And then it also had Graham Revell's beautiful lyrical score for the film. And, you know, at the time it captured, again, whether it was goth or punk or that sort of Neil Gaiman's character Death from the Sandman. There was that going on, again, a zeitgeist movie, and the stylization of it, the use of miniatures, and the fact that also tragically the main character became a ghost himself after being unfortunately killed in an accident on set. So,
Robert, I've got a question, Drinker, as well, because I haven't seen the Crow remake. Do they try to stylize it and to go for a kind of zeitgeist aesthetic in the same way the original Crow really captures that kind of gothy subculture 90s aesthetic?
No.
Or is it just no aesthetic at all?
It's soulless, trashy, modern, like wannabe action thrillery look to it.
Yeah, I mean they go to them putting all these people in pink garb for their rehab. I mean,
it's like if you tried to remake Seven in the current day, that's the look that it's got. It's trying to be like dirty and grungy, and like it just fails horribly.
When I had a feeling we might have had to talk about it, I was like, I don't have to watch it, do I? And you mercifully told me no, Drinker, but I did watch.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the box office of it.
Yeah, when I watched your video on it and you were opening up, because I'd recently rewatched the '94 Crow, which I think is awesome, and like the watching your video, you start explaining the fucking whole story for the girlfriend, and I was already getting confused. I was like, why are you spending so much time telling me all this nonsense? Like, obviously about the film. It's like, do you understand how slick and simple it was in the original? Why do you think this shit works? Why do you have to make everything stupid?
Well, I was baffled by the decision to like base so much of the story around Shelley. Like, she's not the main character. It's not her story. It's Eric's story. And so to make her like essentially the lead of the movie up until about like the 30-40 minute mark, it's a baffling idea. The original movie is so efficient because she's fucking dead, like literally dead from the opening of the film. And like the only time you see her is in like little flashbacks, ghost visions, that sort of thing. That's it. But you understand what she means to Eric, who's the main character. It's
and what she means to the Sarah, the little girl, their proxy daughter. You know, they're like they're like the purest people in that horrible, in Detroit. And they have their daughter, they have a family, and they have true love, even though they live in basically a hellscape. And that was completely absent from this remake.
They went even worse than that. It's one of the worst decisions they made in the entire film, and it's a film of bad decisions, was in not beginning with them already in love. Because the film actually had to go and establish their relationship from the ground up, but it didn't have any characters with which to establish a relationship. So this supposedly pivotal relationship is founded on, I like music, so do I. I like tattoos, so do I.
And drugs.
I'm madly in love, and I will sacrifice my eternal soul to save
once
you.
Again, the fucking filmmaking, like language, to be nice and pretentious. The way that you get him up in the same place that he was killed in the original film, and he is like re-experiencing some of his most treasured memories when he was living, as well as what happened when he died, losing his mind, trying to recontextualize being alive again with the life that he lived, and then finally reaching a bit of a zen and understanding exactly what's happened, and then it's like all of that's achieved so quickly and so powerfully too, right? To keep switching between the past and the future. But oh well.
I have another question I'm sure a lot of people are curious about. Obviously, Brandon Lee had real gravitas and screen presence in the role. Like, he's so magnetic on screen. He's dynamic and explosive. What was Bill Skarsgård like in the role?
Awful. I mean, he's got a degree of physicality, no doubt about that. Like, you see him, he's shirtless quite a bit, and like he's big and muscular. Like, okay, so fine, that works. But he's a very different version of Eric than what you got in the original movie, because in the original, you just got glimpses of him before he was killed, and he was just like a man in love. He was like a rock musician and stuff. Here, he's like a recovering drug addict. He's had a traumatic childhood. He's very much like a broken soul, and like he's lost. And it's her who kind of like steers him on the right path and like redeems him to a degree before she gets killed. And so he comes across as just quite weak and just a bit of a pussy. He just kind of follows her everywhere. She kind of like calls the shots. She's the driving force behind the narrative up until the midpoint. He's not a character that you can get behind as a hero, even in his early phase. So yeah, and I think Bill Skarsgård playing him, he's obviously a great actor. Like, he can definitely play certain roles very well,
like the It Clown.
Exactly, yeah. He was good in John Wick 4. He was having fun with that kind of menacing character. In this, not so much. Like, he just feels a bit lost. It's like the writing is weak, so it doesn't seem to know what it wants from him as an actor, and so he doesn't know what he's supposed to be delivering. So I just feel like he's struggling through a lot of the movie. It's fine when he goes into crow mode right at the end, where he's just basically a Terminator, but that's kind of different from the bulk of the movie.
Right.
That's it's the best way I can describe it. I know that's
but it wasn't, again,
explanation.
The movie made all these choices where what I found fascinating about the film was you loved Eric and Shelley, and you loved Eric. Like, when he comes back, he has relationships. Ernie Hudson plays like the one good cop represents.
Yeah.
And Eric comes in and when they confront one another, he's back from the dead and the cop knows, and Eric gets him a beer, and there's humor there. And there's the fact that this specter has come back on Devil's Night, the night before Halloween, and it really is like a fairy tale. And when you're watching it, there's real emotion. You know, there's real you feel something there, and you like Eric. Like he's at one point he gets his old guitar and starts shredding on the roof because this mournful guitar sound, and he's like crying through his guitar. And there's all of these things that are very affecting, and it's like it was lyrical, and I think everyone that loves goth music and everyone that loves that movie, there's all of that extra layer of it, and none of it was in this New Crow. You don't love Eric Draven. You should love Eric Draven. And you know
the little touches, like when Sarah's walking across the street and she says, "Oh, I wish it would stop raining," and he says, "Oh, it can't rain all the time." Lovely little touch. It's almost like a musical lyric. Just little touches like that. They're all over the movie.
And you know, the great scene where Eric confronts Darla, Sarah's mother, and quotes William Makepeace Thackeray and says, "God is mother is the name. God is." What is it? Mother is the name of God, or God is the name of mother on the lips and hearts of all children. And then he extracts the morphine from her
veins,
her veins. And it's a great moment, and it shows that this is even though he's a ghost and he's a goth rock and roll star, and he's coming back to kill a bunch of guys to avenge his girlfriend's death, he's a spirit of, in a way, goodness, certainly vengeance. But it's not beyond him to bring good and to help to save someone else's soul. And that was a part of it too. And they added this really weird thing where one of the villain is now made a deal with the devil and has to provide souls for the devil.
Oh,
and that's why.
Oh, dude,
and all this, it was.
Did you forget about that, Drinker?
I was thinking like Top Dollar, like from the original movie, was very much just a regular old human. But he was a menacing, dangerous figure in his own right because he was resourceful, and he was he got onto like what Eric was towards the end. He started to figure out how he could fight him. So that made him an interesting character in his own right, like human versus the supernatural. But like the supernatural is like on our side essentially, like he's the hero. This time around, it's like, he's fucking, he's got like some crazy supernatural thing going on himself. He's like made a deal with the devil so he can live forever, but he has to sacrifice souls in order to maintain it. And it's just, you pick this fucking old man to play him, and he's not like dangerous compared to Eric. Like, it's such a crazy mismatch. It doesn't work. It doesn't work on any sort of level.
And then the question... Then I kept waiting for an answer to this question. So if you have two elements of supernatural darkness, are they in opposition?
Yeah.
Is the fact that Eric Draven was brought back from the dead by God?
Kronos.
And then you have the devil. And so wouldn't the conflict then be with, and I know this, I'm probably overthinking it, but it angered me to no end that they added this extra layer of...
Oh, it's so simple in the original. You follow it easily. You understand everything that's happening. Very vengeance. Because I was going to say, like, obviously I haven't seen the new one, but
don't ever.
Michael Wincott, right, who was born to play villains. He's amazing. Villain role he ever has. Perfect voice, perfect look. So obviously it was like probably going to be downgraded no matter what. But Danny Houston, right, the guy in the new one, like I think he's good when really well used, but this sounds like the phoning in sort of villain he plays in like every fucking movie he's in. He plays the same type of bad guy. It's always a corporate, big business type, suit wearing, I don't care about anybody type guy. He does it all the time.
You know when he played Ludendorff in Wonder Woman, right? And it was like essentially an old, out of shape, middle-aged guy versus a fucking demigod who's indestructible.
He had drugs that made him super strong. Or
yeah, it's like an elderly German man on steroids versus like a goddess. Yeah, well, that's kind of what you end up with here. Like he's outmatched, and he's lost in a script like this. Danny Houston is a pretty good actor, but this movie just doesn't know what to do with him and how to utilize him properly.
It's unfortunate how many movies I feel like I've seen with him just playing that. So remember, he's great in 30 Days of Night. That's where he
Yes,
gets.
he
Oh
is.
yeah.
He gets to play something different instead of always with the I am evil and rich and don't like the little man. But
He's
like,
actually
when
quite
Children
good.
of Men too.
He's quite good in Yellowstone as well. Actually, he plays like that kind of corporate, slimy, lawyery bad guy quite well
remember they
there
had
too.
him. He was Stryker in X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
Good times. Good times.
another great part of that movie. They were just winning all over with that film.
Mhm.
But yeah, man, The Crow. It flopped massively at the cinema. It probably deserved to, and I don't think anyone's going to shed too many tears over it.
It's barely a cultural fart in the wind. You can't really say that.
Yeah, that's the damning indictment of them all. A cultural fart in the wind. Well, anyway, guys. Yeah, we've been at this for about 3 hours now. So.
Yeah, it was a fast-paced episode, kind of just ripping apart everything.
Yeah, pretty much.
The Crow, Romulus, and of course, Rings of Power.
There's so many things to
we've
rip
barely
apart.
scratched the surface of Rings of Power.
I know.
No, I
2
know.
hours.
I don't know. I don't know how I'm even going to begin to do a review of it. Like, because I don't want to get into longman territory. I want to make this like it doesn't deserve that amount of effort put into it. If you know what I mean, like it doesn't deserve hour-long reviews. It deserves like a quick. This is shit. Don't watch it. That's all.
Sometimes with this stuff,
deserves.
In prep for like a show like this, and I'm like, I'm going to watch this through. I sometimes have this insane thought where I'm like, what if I watch it and I don't really have much to say, like because it's so boring and empty or whatever. And then I watch it and I'm like, fuck, I can't wait to talk about this. I have a million things to say. Like, because it's so reliably awful. They keep making decisions that blow my mind every time. I'm like, how did you... Dude, we didn't even talk about the scene with the orc that attacked Isildur and his head exploded because I lost my mind watching that. I thought it was so funny.
3 more hours. We can do it. We can cover all of it. 3 more hours. Let's go.
All of it.
Oh, man.
This is fuel for 1,000 EFAPs. It really is.
Oh, we'll get around to it. We did it last time. We'll do it this time. We could have 11-hour episodes or just 2 episodes of the show. So
it will be easier next week on Open Bar as well because it's like 1 episode that we have to get through. So there's 3 times less insanity that time.
Don't say that. They could up the insanity 3 times. They might well do that. I could see them doing that.
They could condense it. Yeah, I suppose.
by the way, I got the impression from watching these that the initial plan would have been to release 2, not 3, because they have the big Anatar reveal at the end of episode 2. The end of episode 3, nothing that significant. Like they've agreed with the dwarves on the plan. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I thought something huge was going to happen in episode 3, and that's why they wanted 3.
I think what they were doing was building a fucking wall against people like us. So like it was going to be hard to critique all 3 of them at the same time, and a lot of people would just think, nah, it's not worth the effort.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Season 1 launched with 2 episodes, right?
Yes.
Like I got the impression the way they built this season, they expected that to happen because it was the big old like, oh my god, Celebrimbor's been tricked by Anatar. That's
maybe it was just a ratings thing. Like they want to claim more minutes for the debut or something like that. It could be as cynical as that.
I think that's probably what it is. Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
it's all going to get lumped together into the debut,
Yeah.
and so 3 times the opportunity.
Yeah, it'll allow them to market it as being bigger than it actually is because they know that this thing's a fucking bomb and it's going to be terribly.
If you select it on Amazon, right, it actually says on the listing for it, 6-time Primetime Emmy Award nominee. The Rings of Power. It didn't actually win anything, but it was nominated, so
That's a
makes
joke,
it sound
man.
impressive. Yeah. Anyway, I want to say thank you, you panel, you lovely people that have suffered through 3 episodes of Rings of Power with me. I appreciate your sacrifice, and the chat does as well. So thank you for coming on to talk about this. I appreciate you guys for giving up some time for this one.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
This is great. Thanks for having me.
Always. And for everyone in chat, thank you for joining us and trying to make sense of this nightmare. Thank you for all the amazing super chats as well. I know we barely got through any of them tonight, but we will, as we always do, we will answer them fully and completely when we do our catch-up stream. I just feel like there was so many other things to try and get through tonight. We just didn't have time for everything, but appreciate you guys for joining us in chat and for super chatting us. So for now, that is it for Open Bar 109. So that's all we've got for today. Go away now.
Bye.